Chapter 4660. She regretted it as soon as she finished speaking. As expected, Chin Mo immediately looked at her with bright eyes. "Do you want to be alone with me?" He Huan snorted and then focused on the movie. It was really strange to reserve the theater. She found it hard to get into it. Moreover, she didn't have any expectations. Because He Huan, who was 18 years old, had never thought about being a director. However, after looking at it for 5 minutes, her expression changed. She didn't remember what happened later, but she had an indescribable feeling when she watched the movie. It touched her heart, which was something that even Chin Mo couldn't do. He said that they loved each other, didn't they? But why couldn't he be better than a movie? He Huan thought about it and then looked at him with a little complaint. Feeling her gaze, Chin Mo smiled. "How was it?" He Huan's gaze fell back to the screen. She stared at it for a long time before she exclaimed, "The editing is amazing, and AI Meng Meng acted the best." Hearing her words, Chin Mo smiled faintly. This was He Huan. A girl with principles. Even if she didn't like AI Meng Meng, she was still a rival in love in He Huan's heart. But she couldn't deny her talent and acting skills, so He Huan wouldn't be stingy with her praise. Although she had a small temper, she was still very broad-minded. That was one of the reasons why Chin Mo liked her. But it wasn't the main reason. He liked how unreasonable she was when she threw a tantrum. He liked how she was spoiled by him. So, he was also a masochist. Every time he thought about giving up, he would think that there was only one He Huan in the world. Maybe there were women who were prettier, gentler, or even cuter than her, but so what? They weren't He Huan. So, their excellence and cuteness meant nothing to Chin Mo. She was the only one he liked, and it had been almost 30 years since then. He was already 40 and probably only had another 30 years left. He didn't want to waste time looking for another woman. Even if it was right in front of him, he might not want it. He Huan did not know that Chin Mo's mind was in turmoil. She just looked at the screen, focused, because this was her future. Actually, it was the past again. After a long time, the movie finally ended. He Huan was still staring blankly at the screen and muttered, "Was this really directed by me?" Chin Mo looked at her quietly. He Huan slapped his face with all his might. "I'm not dreaming, right? I'm so outstanding." Chin Mo couldn't take it anymore. He chuckled and said, "I edited it." He Huan's little mouth opened slightly, and she looked dumbfounded. "You? Is it strange? I work for an entertainment company. I know a little of almost everything, but I'm not very good at it." He Huan was speechless again. How is this not very proficient? This was simply forcing others to have no food to eat. He Huan stared at him. Chin Mo smiled, took her hand and walked out. When they went out, there was a crowd in another hall. The movie had just ended. When He Huan and Chin Mo came out, they bumped into the crowd opposite them. Although He Huan was wearing sunglasses, she was still recognized. A few crazy fans shouted her name, and some even wanted to rush over. After all, their idol had been injured, and they were excited to see her. Chapter 4661. When the fans rushed over, Chin Mo quietly pulled He Huan behind him. Then, bodyguards stopped the crazy fans so that Chin Mo and He Huan could leave. In the elevator, He Huan and Chin Mo were standing side by side. She stole a glance at Chin Mo. He didn't look too good. She didn't know what was wrong with him. What was wrong with him? But she still asked worriedly, "Do you think I will disappoint the fans if I just run away like this? Will there be any negative impact?" Chin Mo's face was still a little sullen. He Huan stared at him for a while and then asked tentatively, "Chin Mo, what's wrong with you?" Chin Mo glanced at her and said slowly, "I thought you didn't want to be a big director. Now you've become vain and want fans?" He Huan smiled and said, "Of course I want fans. I will get a share of the box office, right?" She was not stupid. The money was hers. Chin Mo looked at her and said, "I forgot to tell you. You are not 18 yet, so you don't have a bank card. I will save the box office for you when you grow up." He Huan was anxious. She said hurriedly, "I am not 18, I am 33. I can get a bank card now." Chin Mo smiled and then looked at her face attentively. He said slowly, Then you will have to admit that you are Mrs. Qin. He Huan bit her lip and said after a long while, I don't want it. Qin Emo didn't care. He rubbed her hair and said, if you don't want it, you can continue to be an 18-year-old girl. I don't mind. She was not in good health before. When they lived together, he took care of her most of the time. Now, he was taking care of her too. There was no difference. Not sleeping in separate rooms was Qin Mo's bottom line. At that moment, He Huan didn't think that far. She didn't know that she was facing the 40-year-old Qin Mo. He was not as innocent as he was in his 20s. When the elevator reached the second floor, He Huan got into the car and realized that it was Qin Mo who was driving. She asked subconsciously, where's Uncle Zhao? Qin Mo drove a Mulsanne, which he often drove, but He Huan didn't quite remember it. She had thought that with his identity, he would always be the chauffeur, but he was driving by himself, and he seemed to be very familiar with it. He Huan sat next to him and listened to his words while looking around at the things in the car. She couldn't remember anything, but she had always grown up with Qin Mo. As long as she couldn't sense the danger he emitted, they were very familiar with each other, just like a family. That was why she dared to touch his things. However, the things in the car were all very feminine. It was obvious that a woman often sat beside it. From perfume to toilet paper, there was even a small blanket with a finny piggy design on it. Even though she was touched, He Huan pretended not to know and asked, do women often sit in your car? Qin Mo tilted his head and looked at her before chuckling softly. Why do you ask? He Huan bit her lip. These are all women's things. How could they be yours? Qin Mo didn't reply at first and continued driving. That moment of silence made He Huan feel a little uneasy. Could Qin Mo have really cheated on her? She looked at Qin Mo blankly. Just as she was about to ask something, he said, it's not what you're thinking. He Huan froze for a moment. He could read her mind. Chapter 4662. Qin Mo continued driving and said faintly, these are all your things. He Huan was stunned again. What else can I do? Qin Mo held the steering wheel with one hand and stopped at the red light in front of him. His other hand gently rubbed his good-looking chin, looking particularly masculine. He Huan fiddled with the things again and looked up at him. Really? He was still looking at her. 33 years old and still likes these things. Do you think all women are like this? He Huan replied, oh. After a while, she looked at him again. Then, she was shocked by the brightness in his eyes. Even He Huan, who was like an idiot now, thought that Qin Mo wanted to do something bad. She did not say anything. She lowered her eyes and fiddled with the things with her slim fingers. Then she looked up at him again. That little gaze of hers was really a little pitiful. Qin Mo couldn't help but laugh, and he laughed very happily. He Huan could not help but shout, what are you laughing at? Qin Mo started the car and looked ahead. After a while, he snorted happily. There are a lot of things that you don't know. He Huan's face suddenly became a little hot. She did not dare to say anything and turned her face away from the window. She could not help but complain in her heart. The 40-year-old Qin Mo was too difficult to get along with. Just like that, the two of them did not say anything and the car drove all the way to his apartment. It was also the place where they lived after their marriage. He Huan had not lived in the wedding house for more than a few months. It was a mansion of about 300 square meters. When the car stopped, He Huan asked, is this the hospital? Why did she not recognize it? Qin Mo unfastened the seatbelt. Let's go home. He unfastened the seatbelt for her and patted her little head. He Huan felt that her little brain had crashed after being patted. After a long time, she muttered softly, I will be discharged tomorrow. Qin Mo found it funny and said, do you think I will give you a chance to see Rongyu? I won't go either. He Huan lowered her head. Every strand of her hair was filled with dejection. I have a wife. Oh. Qin Mo dragged out his voice. After a while, he chuckled and said, if you don't have a wife, you won't stand on ceremony, right? He Huan bit her lip. I didn't say that. Qin Mo smiled again. Don't forget that you have a husband, 18-year-old girl. He Huan was about to explode. She glared at him, her face round and round. Qin Mo chuckled and got out of the car. Actually, he thought that the current situation was not bad. He Huan was quite interesting. Suddenly, he thought that perhaps this was heaven's compensation to him, making up for all the time that belonged to him. She would make it up to him for all the time he had lost her. Qin Mo's eyes suddenly felt a little hot. He stood in front of He Huan's car door and was ready to pull it open. However, the throbbing in his heart came so suddenly that he was not prepared at all. He could only suppress it and try his best to suppress it. Only when he calmed down did he open the car door. He bent slightly and said gently, "We're home." No matter how stupid He Huan was, she still knew this. She sat in the car and felt that her legs were a little weak. She could not even take a step forward. She bit her lower lip and felt that it was too embarrassing. She did not want him to know. Chapter 4663. She bit her lower lip, feeling embarrassed. She didn't want him to know either. However, the 40-year-old Qin Mo had a skill that allowed him to accurately understand her needs. He was already bent over, so he easily lifted her up. "Princess Carrie." He Huan couldn't help but let out a yelp. Afraid that she would fall, she immediately hooked her arms around Qin Mo's neck. Qin Mo lowered his head and looked at her. "Put me down," she said softly, almost not daring to look at him. Qin Mo's voice was also very soft and abnormally hoarse. "Didn't I carry you like this when you were young?" He Huan said pitifully, "I've grown up." Qin Mo was still looking at her quietly as they walked. When they reached the elevator, he didn't let her down. He only said softly, "Now that you've become small again, I'm old." "He Huan, do you think that I'm old?" He Huan shook her head. "No, you're not old." Then he lowered his head and kissed her. His voice was hoarse and husky. "I'd better treat you like a child. You're indeed young and insensible now, so I won't fuss too much. Fortunately, it's quite interesting." Qin Mo laughed. His smile was rather joyful. Then he lowered his head and kissed her. He Huan was a little shocked. Even if she only remembered that she was 18, she couldn't be a child. When she retorted like that, Qin Mo laughed softly. "I'm 40, He Huan. Compared to me, you're not a child." He Huan was shocked again and decided to ignore him. She couldn't win against him in an argument. The elevator door opened. There was only one apartment on the top floor. He swiped the card to open the door. The moment she entered, He Huan was stunned. She was sure that if this was the place they were going to live in after marriage, it wouldn't be decorated like this. How should she put it? This was a place where a young girl lived. Many of the soft clothes were light pink, and some were light yellow. She didn't remember having such a young girl's heart, but now that she saw it, she actually felt that it was not bad. Qin Mo put her down, but did not let her escape. Instead, he gently held her in his arms. His tall body leaned slightly, and his chin rested on her shoulder. He whispered, "Do you like it?" He Huan was a little nervous. Feeling that the atmosphere was a little strange, she turned her head away uncomfortably. There was a hint of a smile in Qin Mo's voice. "It's best not to move." She let out another "ah" and did not dare to move again. Only his eyes dared to look around. Qin Mo's voice was still very low. "If you want to stop at 18, I'll accompany you." He Huan let out another before she muttered, "Then you," Qin Mo smiled. "You're just asking for a yard after being given an inch." Her face flushed for a moment before she bit her lip. "How did you know?" He tilted his head and looked at her attentively. After a while, he chuckled. "A 40-year-old man knows women very well. If you were a child, it would be easier to understand." He Huan was fuming again. In reality, she couldn't win against him. At that moment, she wanted to go home. Because living with a 40-year-old man was really too scary. However, she did not dare to bring it up, nor did she dare to make a fuss about leaving. If she dared to, she was sure that he would have other requests. He Huan did not dare to provoke him. Qin Mo finally let go of her and patted her. "Look around by yourself. I'll go make dinner. Also, this place has been renovated recently. The materials used are all environmentally friendly, so there won't be any pollution." Chapter 4664. "Oh," He Huan replied and looked around. Qin Mo looked at her back for a while before he went to the kitchen. He Huan looked around. It was huge and the decorations were very girly. Except for Qin Mo's study, which was maintained in a dignified manner. This was probably Qin Mo's last bit of stubbornness. He Huan didn't go in. She only looked at the door for a while. Then, she opened a children's room. It was a suite and it was all pink. She even saw a pink bathtub in the bathroom. Oh my god, it was quite cute. He Huan wanted to go in and soak for a while. Qin Mo came in with a glass of juice and saw He Huan looking at the bathtub eagerly. He smiled. Our room is pink too, and it's bigger and more comfortable. You can soak in it. He Huan turned to look at him in disbelief. He was actually willing to use a pink bathtub. Qin Mo was dazzled by her starry eyes, and a smile appeared in his eyes. I know how to take a shower. It won't be like what you're imagining. He Huan nodded and asked again, You really don't know how to? I don't. Qin Mo's face was a little dark. He put the juice in her hand. Go take a bath and rest for a while. He raised his hand and looked at his watch. Dinner will be served in about 2 hours. Just eat whatever you like. He Huan wasn't ignorant at all. She said softly, You're so busy. Isn't it a waste to spend 2 hours cooking? Qin Mo looked down. Isn't home life like this? Do you want me to go home and still look like an elite? He paused for a moment. If you want, I can cooperate. He Huan bit her lip and immediately refused. I don't like it. He smiled and helped her take off her coat. You don't have to wear it because of the temperature at home. Go take a bath. Don't take too long. He instructed her like an old father. He Huan looked at him strangely and went to take a bath by herself. In the master bedroom, it wasn't as girlish as outside. There was always a hint of masculinity. Perhaps it was because Qin Mo needed to sleep too, so he couldn't stand being so feminine. The main color was white and beige, which was very comfortable. He Huan lay down on the big white four-poster bed. Lying on her stomach, she closed her eyes and felt very comfortable. It was so comfortable that she wanted to sleep. She really fell asleep. After some time, Qin Mo came over and found that she had fallen asleep. He couldn't help smiling and sat down next to her. He looked at her sleeping appearance, a 33-year-old woman who had been his wife for so many years. He reached out a hand and gently stroked her hair, chuckling, You still say you're not a child. His heart was indescribably soft. He lowered his head and kissed her. After thinking for a while, he decided not to wake her up for dinner. Her health was not good, and she was probably exhausted from playing for half a day. Qin Mo accompanied her for a while before going to the study to deal with work. Recently, he could only accompany her at home or in the hospital. She was so young now, and he was really worried about her. He had to bring her along everywhere. Just the thought of it made him feel silly. It was warm in the master bedroom. When He Huan woke up, she had a blanket on her body. She rubbed her eyes and sat up immediately. Looking at the blanket on her body, she was a little confused and understood. Chapter 4665. He Huan removed the blanket from her body and got out of bed. It was quiet everywhere in the apartment. She looked around but didn't see Qin Mo. It was strange that she was looking for Qin Mo in such a strange place. Finally, she found him in the study. She pushed the door open and saw Qin Mo sitting behind the huge wooden desk. He was holding a cigarette in one hand and flipping through some documents with the other. His fingers were beautiful, slender, and strong. He Huan looked at them eagerly. Then, she thought disappointingly that it had nothing to do with her whether his fingers looked good or not. She stood there and called out to him like a kitten. Qin Mo looked up. In that instant, there was a hint of exhaustion in his eyes. It was pure physical exhaustion. He Huan was stunned. She had never thought that Qin Mo would be tired. In her impression, he was always full of energy. Was it because he was old? She asked in a daze. Qin Mo maintained his original posture. He held the cigarette in his hand and stared at her quietly. After a long time, he smiled. I'm old. If it was the 33-year-old He Huan, she would have known that it was dangerous. But the 18-year-old was a little ignorant and dumb. She said, 40 is a little old. I remember that you should be 25. Qin Mo got up and walked towards her. His body was tall and straight, slender and powerful. He was very, very masculine. He Huan stammered as he thought about it. Qin Mo walked straight over. He was no more than 10 centimeters away from her. He lowered his head and murmured, "I'm not old at 40. If you don't believe me, we can try." He Huan looked up and stared at him for a few seconds. Then she covered her face and ran out. As she ran, she shouted, "Qin Mo, you're so shameless." Qin Mo smiled and covered his eyes with his hands. He sighed softly. If she was 18 years old, so be it. At most, the older Yi Huan would take care of her. At least, he had liked her when she was in her teens. 18 years old was enough. Yi Huan didn't know his perverted thoughts. She ran into the dining room, turned around, and snorted at Qin Mo, "I'm hungry. Where's the food?" Qin Mo was wearing a black shirt. He didn't look like he was at home at all. However, he still brought out Thai cuisine. It was done very well and it was fragrant. Yi Huan's eyes lit up and her voice was soft. "Qin Mo, when did you learn that?" Qin Mo smiled and sat down. "Didn't I say that there are many things you don't know?" "Oh," Yi Huan replied. She sat down and couldn't wait to taste it. She felt that every one of her taste buds had been conquered and smoothed. It was too delicious. As he ate, he glanced at Qin Mo from time to time, thinking how amazing he was. Qin Mo didn't say anything and looked indifferent. Yi Huan ate very quickly. She was satisfied after about 10 minutes, but she still tried to stuff a little more into her mouth. Qin Mo stopped her. "It's not good to eat too much. If you want to eat, you can cook tomorrow." Yi Huan's eyes were sparkling. After a long time, she said, "Qin Mo, do you know how to cook French food? Is Italian food okay?" And she said a bunch of things. President Qin had been eating. After listening, he calmly wiped his lips. "As long as you need it, I can do it." Yi Huan was stunned again. After a long time, she whispered, "Really?" Chapter 4666. Qin Mo smiled and said softly, "Of course." "Oh," Yi Huan replied and got up. Because she was too full, she held her tummy and slowly moved to the sofa in the living room. Then, she did not want to move anymore. Qin Mo finished his meal and did not tidy up. Instead, he walked over and patted her. "Go wash the dishes." Yi Huan lay there and said confidently, "I don't know how." Qin Mo reached out and pinched her cheeks. After a long time, he said, "You still have to learn. Otherwise, there won't be a feast." Yi Huan said obediently, "Let's go out. It'll be a feast too." Qin Mo's reply was to reach out and flick her cheeks. "You've learned to be bad." As he said that, he got up helplessly. Yi Huan asked carefully, "Are you going to shower?" After she asked, she realized that she had asked the wrong word. Hence, she hurriedly said, "I said it wrong. I meant, are you going to wash the dishes?" He smiled again. "What else?" Yi Huan looked at him helplessly. After a long time, she asked softly, "Are you going to abandon me because I'm not going to wash the dishes?" If he did not want her and take her in, she felt that she had nowhere else to go. At that moment, she almost forgot that she had parents and thought that she was born from a rock. After Yi Huan asked the question, Qin Mo smiled meaningfully. He reached out and patted her head as though he was playing with a puppy. "That's possible." "Oh," Yi Huan replied and got up. She was so full and tired. She raised her head to look at Qin Mo, feeling extremely aggrieved. "I'll just go wash up." Qin Mo held her back and said in a low voice, "Let me do it." Yi Huan was very stubborn this time. She insisted on doing it herself. Even Qin Mo could not hold her back. He thought to himself, "This fool. Does she really think that I'll abandon her if she doesn't do some housework? Did she have no faith in him before she turned 18? Qin Mo smiled and followed her, watching her clear the table. This was not a problem for Yi Huan. She even knew to wipe the table clean. Qin Mo felt like his child had grown up. He leaned on the side with a cup of coffee in his hand and looked at Yi Huan quietly. He knew that Yi Huan wouldn't, so he was very lenient with her and only frowned when she smashed a few plates. He didn't tell her that these plates were her favorite. Each of them was a work of art that she brought back from Milan, and each of them cost tens of thousands. Of course, Qin Mo didn't mind. However, He Huan's finger was pricked when she fell on the fifth one. She immediately frowned as she watched the blood ooze out and mix with the water in the pool. Qin Mo's expression changed. He immediately put the coffee in his hand on the counter and walked over to hold her hand. He looked down at her and said, "You were too careless." "Oh," He Huan replied. She looked really pitiful, so he didn't want to reprimand her. Qin Mo brought her back to the living room and asked her to sit on the sofa while he went to get the first aid kit. When he came back, he sat next to her. The blood had stopped flowing, but the delicate girl kept frowning as if she had been seriously injured. She had always been afraid of pain, and Qin Mo knew that. Now he only felt very funny seeing her like this. Chapter 4667. It wasn't that he didn't feel sorry for her, but she was just too cute. A small wound, as if she was about to leave this world. Just like in the past, when it was just her period and she bled a little, it was as if she had a terminal illness. He Huan was a little girl who was afraid of pain. Sometimes she was so cute that she could explode, and sometimes she was so hateful that it made him vomit blood. But now, she was still cute. He decided to be a little more lenient with her. Reaching out, he caressed her forehead gently to comfort her. Then he opened the first aid kit. It was just a small wound, but Qin Mo treated it like a big one. He disinfected it first. It hurt a little, and the delicate girl kept sucking in air. Qin Mo couldn't continue. He was speechless and stopped. "He Huan, are you deliberately making my heart ache?" He Huan's eyes were wide open as she stared at him. "Did I? Why should I make your heart ache? And I didn't do anything." Qin Mo was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood again. He glared at her. He Huan's voice was as soft as a little lamb. "Qin Mo, are you angry?" He glanced at her. Her voice rang out crisply again. "If you're angry, will you take revenge on me? Will you hurt me on purpose?" "Shut up." His tone was very unpleasant. Then he bandaged her wound. Yes, as she wished, he hurt her in revenge. Amidst He Huan's cries, Qin Mo was satisfied. But his girl was crying. She leaned against the sofa angrily, her body twitching. Qin Mo wanted to talk to her, but she turned her little face to the side and watched the television out of boredom. At this moment, a saying came to Qin Mo's mind, "Fearless when you're favored." But at times like this, he was still very willing to pamper her. After tidying up, he said casually, "I think it would be good to eat a shredded apple after dinner." He Huan's ears immediately perked up like a little rabbit. Qin Mo didn't seem to notice her reaction and seemed to be talking to himself, "But no one will eat it after I make it. I'd better go to the study to work." "Someone's eating, He Huan shouted. Qin Mo smiled, looked at her, and then reached out his hand. He Huan stared at him for a long time. Finally, she tilted her little face towards him and let him pinch it like a pet. Only then was he satisfied and got up to do it. He Huan was waiting patiently, but after a while, she decided to go to the kitchen to have a look. Qin Mo was making it and he looked very skilled. He Huan was in a daze again. He looked so handsome when he was making desserts. Is there anything he can't do, she thought? Qin Mo could feel that she was at the door and was peeking at him. He didn't say anything and just let her see. He Huan didn't stand on ceremony. When he was done, she wasn't peeking anymore. She leaned over like a little puppy. That look was really quite funny. "Do you want to try it?" After Qin Mo said that, he thought of Enchanting and Yi Huan. He sighed in his heart. He was an enlarged Enchanting. Yi Huan was no different from Yi Huan now. The only difference was that he only knew how to eat and sleep. But the girl who was looked down on didn't think about anything else. She just wanted to eat. She finished the small bowl in a short while. She even looked at Qin Mo when she was done. "You're so annoying." Qin Mo was still smiling lightly, but he suddenly leaned forward and kissed her lightly on the lips. He Huan was stunned. Her mind went blank. He said that he would kiss her if she didn't drink it. But she drank it. Why did he kiss her? Qin Mo seemed to know what she was thinking. He chuckled. "We're husband and wife. It's normal for us to kiss." Husband and wife? Normal. Chapter 4669. Qin Mo seemed to know what she was thinking. He chuckled. We are husband and wife. It's normal for us to kiss. Husband and wife? Normal? Huan wondered if other things were normal in his heart. She stared at him for a long time. Qin Mo patted her head happily. Go take a bath and sleep later. He looked at his watch and reminded her. It's 9 o'clock. Huan looked at him pitifully. Don't adults sleep late? Qin Mo's eyes were tinged with a touch of amusement. You want to sleep late? Huan stared into his eyes as if she was possessed. After about half a minute, she immediately jumped down and ran towards the direction of the bedroom. Qin Mo still maintained his original posture. He looked at her back and laughed. You're not stupid after all. Actually, she was not stupid. She was very smart. How could Qin Mo not know that she only accepted him now because she depended on him? He was someone she had known since she was young and he was willing to take care of her. Rong Yu was married and Huan was just looking for comfort. How could it be so easy to fall in love with someone else? If it was so easy, it wouldn't be called love. Actually, he could understand, but his heart still hurt a little. He was also made of flesh and blood. He would also feel pain. Qin Mo sat quietly for a while and went to the study to smoke. Actually, work was endless. He just sat in the study for a while so that he wouldn't scare her. After all, in Huan's heart, they were not really husband and wife. She would be afraid to sleep together. Qin Mo sat in the study and smoked quietly. In the master bedroom, Huan lay on the bed for a while. Her little head was pressed against the white bedsheet and her face was rubbing against the high-quality fabric. She felt very comfortable. After lying there for a while, she got up and went to the changing room to get a bathrobe. Her face was a little hot. She didn't know why she was blushing and her heart was warm. She quickly went to take a bath and felt very comfortable all over. Huan closed her eyes and held onto the bathtub. Slowly, she fell asleep. When Qin Mo returned to the bedroom, he saw such a scene. Huan lay quietly in the bathtub. Her breathing was shallow, and her face was tilted to the side. He was very quiet and obedient. He couldn't help but laugh. He reached out to touch his forehead and went over to pick her up. He also realized that the water in the bathtub was actually cold. He looked at her silently and sighed. Without saying anything, he carried her back to the bedroom. He carefully dried her body and helped her put on the bathrobe. He felt that her body was a little cold. Qin Mo was worried, so he went to find 2 hot water packs and filled them with 60 degrees Celsius water. He placed them on both sides of her body to warm her up, while he made himself a simple shower. Then, he made a cup of coffee and went to work in the bedroom. That night, he did not dare to sleep, for fear that she would have a fever. But the more one was afraid, the more likely it would happen. Huan's fever started in the latter half of the night. Her forehead was very hot. Qin Mo measured it for her. It was 39 degrees Celsius. Huan probably wasn't feeling well either. She woke up and opened her eyes. She said in a daze, "Brother?" Qin Mo was stunned for a while before he came back to his senses. She was treating him as a 25-year-old now. His heart throbbed and there was an indescribable softness in it. "You're a little hot. I'll go get some water and medicine." Chapter 4670. Memorized. Qin Mo was just about to leave when the little girl hugged his waist from behind. "Don't go." Qin Mo lowered his eyes and looked at the slender fingers on his waist. He said in a low voice, "I'm just going to get something." Leaning against his back, Huan was in a daze. She felt very hot and very cold at the same time. It was extremely uncomfortable. She lowered her eyes and said in a weak voice, "Brother." He grunted in acknowledgement and tilted his head to look at her. "You're already so big, yet you're still so clingy." Actually, he couldn't be too harsh on her. She only remembered what happened before she turned 18. At that time, she was just a little girl and didn't know anything. He was the one who taught her how to use sanitary pads. As Qin Mo said this, Huan hugged him a little tighter. "I feel terrible. I want to accompany her." Qin Mo smiled and picked her up. He carried her to the living room like he was carrying a child to get some water and medicine. Fortunately, it was warm everywhere in the house. Qin Mo easily carried her with one hand. She was really too light and too skinny. She was 160 centimeters tall and probably not even 90 centimeters tall. Carrying her was like carrying a small feather. Chinemo looked down at Huan and murmured, "You really should eat more." She was so small now that he wanted to feed her, but he didn't want to spoil her. After much difficulty, he took the medicine and poured her a glass of water. It was quite troublesome for him to bring her back to the master bedroom and put her down. Chinemo sat on the edge of the bed and placed his hand on her forehead. He felt it quietly and felt that she seemed to be a little hotter. Huan looked at him helplessly. "Will I die?" His answer was to pinch her cheeks hard and whisper, "Nonsense." She still looked pitiful. "Brother, I feel terrible." His heart instantly softened. There was still some pain and his voice was hoarse. "I know. I'll be fine after a while." He placed the medicine on his palm and fed it to her. Huan was especially obedient at this moment. She usually didn't like to take medicine, but she obediently ate it now. Chinemo looked at her and said softly, "Drink some water." He reached out to support her, let her lean on his shoulder, and carefully fed her the water. Huan couldn't drink any more after drinking half a cup. She shook her head to indicate that she wanted to take a nap. She slept, but Chinemo couldn't. He had to watch over her. Huan lay down, but she didn't fall asleep immediately. Instead, she opened her eyes and looked at Chinemo quietly. Chinemo's heart was very soft. He reached out his palm and touched her forehead. "Why aren't you sleeping?" Huan's face was still abnormally red. She gently moved her head over and rested it on his arm. Then she whispered, "I'm scared." As she spoke, her little face was especially fragile. Chinemo's heart ached, and his voice became even gentler. "What are you afraid of? I'm here, aren't I?" Huan stared at him and then said in a hoarse voice, "I'm afraid that when I wake up, I won't know what I'll look like." "Chinemo, what if I become a 3-year-old or a 10-year-old?" Chinemo's heart became even gentler. He reached out and brushed her hair with his fingers. Then he said very softly, "Then I'll help you change your diaper." Huan slightly widened her eyes. "I don't want you to change my diaper." So President Qin smiled and said, "Little Mrs. Qin, unfortunately, I changed it for you." Huan glared at him for a while, then pulled the blanket over her face and said softly, "I'm going to sleep." Chapter 4671. Chinemo chuckled and tugged at her blanket. "Don't suffocate yourself." Huan stared at him and did not speak for a long time. Chinemo smiled. "All right, there's nothing embarrassing about it. I'm 7 years older than you, isn't it? It's only right for me to take care of a baby younger than me." He was clearly a man in his 40s. Even though he was clearly speaking in a normal manner, Huan felt as though she was being carefully cared for. She raised her little face and looked at Chinemo. After a while, she said softly, "If I really become a few years older, will you still want me? What do you think?" Chinemo smiled and reached out to caress her forehead. "You've been thinking about random things all day. Take a break when you have time." Huan nodded and closed her eyes obediently. Chinemo looked at her and stayed by her side. After half an hour, he took her temperature. It had dropped a little, and he was finally relieved. After staying by her side for a while, he felt a little sleepy and decided to lean against the headboard so that it would be more convenient for him to look after her. The night was long and short. Chinemo took her temperature a few times. After that, he used physical methods to lower her fever. Fortunately, her temperature finally dropped when the sun rose. When the first ray of sunlight shone in, Huan opened her eyes and realized that she was sleeping in Chinmo's arms. He was leaning against the headboard with his clothes on, and she was leaning sideways in his arms. The smell of his body was very pleasant, and it felt very stable. Huan couldn't help but smell for a while longer. Then she raised her head and wanted to talk to him. However, at that moment, Chinemo happened to be looking down at her, and she bumped into his chin. Chinemo grunted and reached out to hold her hair. He said helplessly, "It's early in the morning." Huan grunted. "I want to get up. Sleep with me for a while more." He hugged her as though she was a doll. He reached out and pressed her little head. I stayed by your side all night last night. I'm exhausted. There was even a hint of complaint in his tone. In his arms, He-Huan whispered to him, "You didn't sleep the whole night?" At this time, all men would pretend to be pitiful. The more pitiful they pretended to be, the more sympathy they would get from women. Chinemo also knew this kind of trick. He rubbed his brows, and his voice sounded tired. "What do you think?" After saying that, he lowered his head and looked at her quietly. When He-Huan saw that his eyes were bloodshot, it was obvious that he was suffering. So she said softly, "Actually, you can sleep for a while." "How can I sleep?" He laughed and hugged her again. "All right, sleep with me for a while. Wake up at 10. Now that Yi-Huan was not at home and he was working at home for the time being, he could still sleep in. As for the reason why he woke up at 10 a.m., it was because He-Huan had to sleep too. He had a meeting at 11 a.m. Since he was so insistent, He-Huan could only accompany him. She thought she wouldn't be able to fall asleep, so she fell into a deep sleep after being hugged by him and smelling his soothing scent. She slept soundly. Chinemo didn't fall asleep immediately. Instead, he looked at her silently for a while before closing his eyes. At about 9:50 a.m., he woke up automatically. On the contrary, the little fellow who had been clamoring to get up was sleeping like a piglet. Chinemo looked at her silently for a while and smiled. When he sat up, he suddenly felt dizzy. Chapter 4672. At about 9:50 a.m., he woke up automatically. On the other hand, the little girl who had been clamoring to get up was sleeping like a pig. Chinemo rubbed his eyebrows and felt a little uncomfortable in his throat. He knew that she must have caught a cold and had a fever. He took the temperature and found that it was 39.5 degrees. He hadn't felt it before. Chinemo shook his head and smiled helplessly. He got up to find some medicine and took 2 pills. Then he went to make breakfast for He-Huan. She had just been sick, so the breakfast he made was light and delicious. However, he felt even more uncomfortable after making it. It didn't matter to him, but he was afraid that he couldn't take care of her. So, Chinemo called Auntie Lan to take care of her for 2 days. After the call, he was about to wake He-Huan up when he saw the little girl standing at the door of the master bedroom. She looked dissatisfied. "Chinemo, you're sick." Her tone was accusatory. Chinemo found it funny. He put down the phone in his hand and stroked it with his slender fingers. Then he smiled and said, "Yes, I'm sick, so I asked Auntie Lan to take care of you for a few days." He-Huan was still staring at him. After a while, she said, "I've recovered. Now it's you, Chinemo, who's sick." He had a look on his face. He-Huan looked a little proud. "I can take care of you too." "Oh," Chinemo said. He found it funny. "What can you do?" "I can learn," she said matter-of-factly. Chinemo just smiled. He-Huan bit her lip and walked over. She took his phone and put it in his hand. "Are you making a call?" She snorted. "What phone call?" "Tell Auntie Lan not to come." There were stars in He-Huan's eyes. "You have me to take care of you. Don't say, 'take care of me.' Say it again." His voice was a little hoarse. He-Huan was stunned. "You have me." After saying that, she realized that she meant something different. She glared at him. "You're taking advantage of me." Chinemo smiled. "We are husband and wife. Isn't that normal?" He-Huan bit her lip and tapped on her phone. "Go ahead." Chinemo stared at her silently. "I really hit him. You have to take responsibility." Although she knew that he was taking advantage of her again, He-Huan acquiesced and nodded with a red face. Chinemo sighed in his heart. He knew that she was not reliable, but he was still willing to give her a chance, which was also a chance for himself. It was always inconvenient to have one more person in the house. At worst, he could ask someone to send food over. He-Huan should be able to do other things. As he thought about it, he made another call. Auntie Lan didn't say anything, but Chinmo's parents knew about Chinmo's illness and He-Huan's previous injury. Now that Chin dared to say it, they had to come and see him no matter what. Chinmo didn't know. After hanging up the phone, he looked at He-Huan. "You eat breakfast. I'm going to have a video conference." He-Huan stopped him. Let's eat together. He looked at her with amusement. It's an important conference. It's not as important as your health, Hee-hwan muttered in a low voice. Hee-hwan muttered in a low voice. Perhaps thinking that it was too emotional, she added, if you can't do it, what about me? Who's going to take care of me? Chapter 4673. Memorize. Chin-mo laughed and pinched her. You're such an exquisite egoist. Hee-hwan snorted. You don't have to use adjectives. She thought for a moment and looked at him. Are you going for breakfast or a meeting? President Chin had a strong will to live. Breakfast. Hee-hwan nodded in satisfaction. That's more like it. She led the way to the dining room. Chin-mo followed and tugged at her hair. Act like a little adult. Hee-hwan glanced at him and said gloomily, I'm 33 years old. Chin-mo smiled and said meaningfully, Aren't you 18? Hee-hwan sat down. It's useless even if I think about it. Look at my face. It doesn't look like I'm 18 at all. I even saw fine lines in the mirror today. Chin-mo also sat down. He laughed when he heard her say that. That's nothing. As he spoke, he really looked at her face. In fact, Hee-hwan looked really young. She looked like she was about 22 or 23 years old. She didn't look like she was 33 years old at all. Of course, women were always particularly concerned about their own appearance, and their requirements were also higher. Especially for an exquisite egoist like Hee-hwan. If she wasn't beautiful, Chin-mo probably wouldn't want her. He could have many young ladies like this. The more Hee-hwan thought about it, the more she felt a sense of crisis. She felt that she had to take care of Chin-mo when he was sick. She became even more attentive. She spread the jam on the bread and brought out the milk. Chin-mo held the milk and smiled. I just took my medicine. I can't drink milk. Hee-hwan looked at him and quickly poured him a glass of water. Is this okay? Chin-mo was still smiling. He drank half a glass and started breakfast. It was already 11 o'clock. The executives of King Entertainment, even those overseas, had stayed up all night waiting for Chin-mo. At this time, Chin-mo and his little wife were having breakfast together. Well, it wasn't much, just half an hour. However, the higher-ups on the other side were all sweating profusely. They didn't know who President Chin was angry with. Maybe it was themselves. How terrifying. Chin-mo ate something and felt better. He was about to go to the meeting when Hee-hwan stopped him again. Let me take your temperature again. President Chin could only continue to sit there and watch Hee-hwan run around to get the thermometer and stuff it under his armpit. She didn't hold back at all. Chin-mo said helplessly, Hee-hwan, why do I feel like you're running a house? Hee-hwan looked at him with her big watery eyes. Don't talk. Chin-mo was even more amused. What will happen if I tell you? You won't be able to speak properly. She spoke very softly, as if she was afraid of disturbing the thermometer. Suddenly, Chin-mo felt sour and bitter. He called her a little idiot. Then he ignored the thermometer and pulled Hee-hwan into his arms. Hee-hwan was a little stunned. Her little face was about to change shape. She asked very softly, Chin-mo, what's wrong? His voice was indescribable. He said in a low and deep voice, how can there be a little idiot like you? Hee-hwan replied with an oh. Then, her little face became even more distorted. She had difficulty breathing and her little face was a little red. She couldn't take it anymore. She raised her little fist and hit his shoulder. Chin-mo, let go of me. Chapter 4674. He looked down and laughed. Without saying anything, he put her down. He took out the thermometer and looked at it. Luckily, it was 39 degrees, a little lower. He put it aside. It's much better. Let's go to the meeting. But it's 39 degrees. Hee-hwan didn't agree. Chin-mo pinched her little nose. Mrs. Chin, I have to support my family. Then, he took her into the study. Sit here. If you feel something is wrong, you can stop it. Hee-hwan could accept this. Then, she sat on the sofa behind him and played games on her phone. Chin-mo turned on the video conference. He didn't mind that there were people in his study. Therefore, all the executives were absent-minded during the meeting. President Qin was having a meeting with his wife. Moreover, Mrs. Qin seemed to be very engrossed in her game. They wanted to play games too. They wanted to throw away their computers, but they had no choice. When they saw President Qin's handsome face, they felt that they had to work harder. When Qin Mo was in the middle of the meeting, the doorbell rang. He Huan was playing games, so she didn't hear it. Instead, Qin Mo heard it. He tilted his head. Huan, go and open the door. The executives on the other side of the video conference were shocked. Huan. All of them instantly melted. Huan put down her phone calmly and ran to open the door. When the door opened, she was stunned for a moment. Then, she greeted Mrs. Qin and Mr. Qin affectionately. At the door, Qin Anlin and Yi Liangqiu were naturally worried about their son and daughter-in-law. When they heard the two greetings, they had mixed feelings. Although they had heard about Huan from Qin Qin, they still felt a little emotional when they saw her in person. Especially Yi Liangqiu. Ever since the incident with Su Ilio, no matter how hard she tried to mend her relationship with Huan, it was no longer what it used to be. Now that Huan called her mother Su, her eyes were filled with tears. Perhaps, the heavens took pity on him and allowed him to restart everything. Yi Liangqiu nodded, took Huan's hand, and said to Qin Anlin, "Go and see your workaholic son. I'll chat with Huan for a while." In his ecstasy, he didn't even want to smash it anymore. Qin Anlin rubbed his nose. He also felt a little helpless. His wife was also very emotional. He walked to the study, and Yi Liangqiu and Huan went to the sofa together. Huan only remembered what happened before she turned 18, so she was quite affectionate and lively. Yi Liangqiu also had daughters, but now all of them had grown up. Qin Mu was a little bored and wasn't by her side. Qin Qin was even more manly than other men. How could he find a cute girl like Huan? Yi Liangqiu really doted on Huan since she was young. Not only did she love Huan, but it was also because of Su Cheng. When women got older, they would always feel a little estranged because of their children's affairs. When they were young, Su Cheng and Yi Liangqiu were very grateful. So now, all of this was reflected in Huan. Huan looked very much like the young Su Cheng. She was small and had a personality. Yi Liangqiu was willing to give everything she had to Huan. Except for Huan, she hadn't had anyone to dote on for a long time. So, after chatting for a while, she decided to take Huan out for a walk. Huan said very slowly, "You have to ask Qin Mo." Yi Liangqiu couldn't help but laugh. "You can't even make this decision?" Then, she realized that Huan's mental age was 18. She must have been controlled by Qin Mo. Chapter 4675. 1 second to remember. On one hand, Yi Liangqiu hated Huan for not striving for success, but on the other hand, she felt that Huan was even more adorable. She had to buy things for her so that she could be worthy of his love. Women were all impulsive. At the thought of this, Yi Liangqiu immediately went to Qin Mo's study. Because of Qin Anlin's arrival, the meeting had to be interrupted. Fortunately, everything that should be discussed had been discussed. At this time, Qin Mo and Qin Anlin were sitting on the sofa, chatting leisurely. They looked especially relaxed, as if he was not sick, and Huan did not lose her memory and return to 18 years old. Everything was so good, quiet, and beautiful. Yi Liangqiu suddenly felt that this was a gift from the heavens. It was to return Qin Mo's original love. She stood by the door and smiled. "You guys talk, I will take Huan out for a walk. She has been staying in the hospital for a few days, so she must be bored. Moreover, she is at the age where she likes to go out." Qin Mo's gaze fell on his mother's face with some curiosity. He seemed to understand something and then smiled. "Okay, remember to take 2 people out." Yi Liangqiu grunted in acknowledgement and left. Meanwhile, Qin Mo picked up the tea in his hand and gently sipped it, as if he was thinking about something. Suddenly, a small head popped out from the door and said in a crisp voice, "Qin Mo, I'm going out." He looked at her with amusement. "Didn't you say that you would take care of me?" Huan made a face. "Daddy Qin is here." Qin Mo frowned and wanted to correct her, but after thinking for a while, he relaxed his eyebrows and didn't say anything. He just stood up and took out a black gold card from the drawer and put it in her palm. Swipe the card yourself. Oh, He Huan replied. She felt as if she was raised by someone. In fact, most of her expenses were borne by Qin Mo since she was a child, so she didn't feel that there was anything wrong with it. But she still had to ask clearly. How much is there? If it wasn't enough, he would lose face. Qin Mo couldn't help but laugh. Just swipe if it's less than 100 million. If it's more than that, call Secretary He. She'll help you settle it. 100 million? He Huan muttered softly, I'm not buying a helicopter. Qin Mo smiled, then casually said, It's my birthday in a month. You can buy me a present, no matter how expensive it is. He Huan blurted out, 40? Qin Mo just stared at her and didn't speak for a long time. He Huan grinned. 40 isn't something to be ashamed of. Qin Mo was still gnashing his teeth. He Huan, you can be even more despicable. He Huan stuck out her tongue and didn't say anything else. Qin Mo rubbed her little head. Have a good meal outside. I'll cook something delicious for you when you come back tonight. His words warmed He Huan's heart. She whispered, I'll cook for you when I get back. He immediately laughed out loud. You're so nice. Yeah. She looked up at him, a little dazed. Qin Mo didn't say anything either. After a while, she said in a coy voice, I'm leaving. Once again, Qin Mo was like a little puppy who kept kissing her. As for the two elders present, they were forcefully showered with dog food. But again, perhaps this was God's arrangement. He Huan still went out with Yi Liangqiu happily. She called her Mama Qin and was even closer to her than her own mother, laughing like a pig. The saddest thing was that after going all out in the morning, they really did bump into He Huan's mother during lunch. Su Qing. Chapter 4676. Su Qing still did not know that He Huan had lost her memory. She only knew that she was injured. Coincidentally, she was not in B City these few days, so she came back and met her. She wanted to go up to her immediately, but just as she was about to go over, she heard He Huan calling her Mama Qin. Su Qing felt that something was wrong. He Huan and Qin Mo were married again. Even if she called him Mama Qin because of emotional problems, how could they be so affectionate? Su Qing was only one table away from where they were eating. After listening quietly for a while, she finally realized that something was wrong. He Huan's expression and tone were very strange. She did not look like an adult at all. She was talking about girly things. She was basically a young girl, and Yi Liangqiu doted on her very much. It was a good thing for a daughter to be doted on by her mother-in-law. However, Su Qing did not think that it was a good thing for her to be doted on like this. Why could an old mother not stand it anymore? She came over and sat down. He Huan was stunned for a moment when she came and did not react for a while. However, Yi Liangqiu immediately understood. Looking at Su Qing's expression, she probably guessed something, so she did not hide it. Su Qing, He Huan doesn't remember anything after she was 18. Su Qing was stunned. Although she felt that it was a little strange, she did not expect it to be like this. After a while, she said in a low voice, What happened? Yi Liangqiu sighed. It seems that a fanatic did it. Qin Mo did not fulfill his responsibility. Don't worry, we will take good care of Huan Huan. Su Qing was still stunned. After a long time, she came back to her senses. Then, she murmured, if she was 18, she was not married yet. I should have brought her back to take care of her. Yi Liangqiu did not expect that Su Qing would have such a way of thinking. The memory stopped at 18, but He Huan and Qin Mo were married. If Su Qing really took her back, what would happen to Qin Mo? Her son was already 40 years old and was still waiting for his birthday present. If he was taken away, Yi Liangqiu would not be able to explain it. Therefore, Yi Liangqiu was naturally unwilling. But on this matter, Su Qing was very insistent. Actually, it was very simple. As a mother, when she thought about her 18-year-old daughter's mentality, how much of a disadvantage she would have to suffer alone with a 40-year-old man like Qin Mo, it was enough for her to be very forceful. He Huan was a little confused. In fact, she had spent more time with the Qin family before she turned 18, so she was closer to Yi Liangqiu. He Huan was actually a little afraid of Su Cheng's persistence. She shrank back a little towards Yi Liangqiu. A small hand gently tugged at Yi Liangqiu's sleeve. How could a veteran like Yi Liangqiu not know what a little girl was thinking? So she patted the back of her hand to comfort her. Then she looked up and discussed with Su Qing gently. The two children get along very well. These days, Qin Mo has been taking care of them. They grew up together. What are you worried about? Su Qing smiled. There was always a hint of sharpness in her smile. She was not a sharp-tongued person. She and Yi Liangqiu had been through trials and tribulations in the past, but Su Qing could not let go of the things that had happened before. Compared with Qin Mo, He Huan was too weak. This was a patriarchal society. No matter how famous He Huan was, the He family's fate was still in Qin Mo's hands. Therefore, Su Qing was very worried. Chapter 4677. Updated quickly, no pop-up windows, and free reading. The two sides were in a deadlock. Finally, Yi Liangqiu called Qin Mo and made an appointment to talk to him in a clubhouse. Su Qing wanted to see Qin Mo at this time. President Qin, on the other hand, had to make the appointment even if he had a fever of 39 degrees Celsius and was busy with work. An hour later, Qin Mo came to the private room of Elan Clubhouse alone. After all, there was only Su Qing, and he didn't want to see the whole Qin family. When he opened the door, it was a private room. Yi Liangqiu was greeting He Huan and Su Qing. It was a bit hard to be the host, but it wasn't Su Cheng's fault. It was Qin Mo's fault. Qin Mo went in and greeted Su Cheng and his mother respectively. Then, he sat beside He Huan and patted her head without saying anything. Su Cheng was enraged. How was this any different from treating a pet? However, she couldn't lose her temper because there was a little girl in front of her, so she was still obedient. Su Qing complained in her heart, what a spineless guy. He Huan, on the other hand, looked at Qin Mo with anxiety in his eyes. To her, Qin Mo was like an old bird, and she was a little bird. She felt at ease living with him, and she didn't want to change anything. Or perhaps, she instinctively wanted a little sense of security. Qin Mo poured a cup of tea for Su Qing respectfully and calmly told her about He Huan's injury and her future recovery. He needed Qin Chen's help, so he said a lot. Su Cheng's mind started to work. Although she was at a disadvantage now, if He Huan couldn't remember in the future, Qin Mo would be better. After talking for about an hour, Su Qing gave up and sighed. Let's go with Qin Mo. All the helplessness he felt was for the sake of his daughter's future, even if there was a chance. Besides, He Huan looked very happy. As a mother, how could she have the heart to ruin her daughter's happiness? Maybe it was a good thing that she forgot. Later, they had dinner together, and Kaim came to pick up Su Cheng. When they got home, they naturally talked about it. He Huan went back with Qin Mo, while Yi Liangqiu and Qin Anlin went back to Liang Garden. As soon as they returned to the apartment, Qin Mo's body temperature rose to 40 degrees Celsius. His stomach problems flared up again, and he knew that he would have to go to the hospital and perhaps undergo surgery. However, he didn't want to scare her, so he just took his medicine and went to bed early. This time, He Huan obediently leaned against him and didn't cause trouble for him. She was afraid that he would die. In the middle of the night, Qin Mo woke up. He woke up in pain. His forehead was full of sweat, and his stomach felt like it was on fire. He closed his eyes and calmed down for a while. Then he got up quietly and didn't dare to wake He Huan up. He went to find the medicine and took it. Then he went outside and called Qin Chen to ask her to come over. Qin Chen was sleeping. In the middle of the night she was dug up again. She wanted to curse, but she couldn't help it. After all, Qin Mo was her second brother. Qin Chen got up soon and drove back to the hospital. She knew Qin Mo's body very well. When she arrived at Qin Mo's apartment, it was already an hour later. In the study, she gave him a painkiller and sneered. I thought you weren't afraid of pain. I didn't expect you to take the initiative to give me a painkiller. Qin Mo glanced at her. Why are you talking so much nonsense? Chapter 4678. Qin Chen could not help but roll his eyes. I know. He Huan is your darling, all right? She thought that Qin Mo would not admit it. Qin Mo was a man who liked to be a man but did not like to talk about it. He was a rather reserved man. But at this moment, after enduring the pain, he felt much more comfortable. He leaned back on the sofa and said in a low voice, "Isn't she my darling now?" Qin Chen could not take it anymore. "Qin Mo, can't you keep a lower profile?" Qin Mo smiled meaningfully. "I'm your wife. Why should I keep a low profile?" Qin Chen smiled. "He Huan is getting smaller. Second brother, you're getting younger too." Qin Mo looked at her and harumphed. Then he closed his eyes. "Give me another shot. You don't have to come tomorrow." Qin Chen was speechless. "How can you do that? Painkillers are not commonly used and you want 2 shots in a row? Are you trying to damage your nerves?" As she said that, she took out a box of medicine. "Be good and take your medicine. You should be fine once your fever subsides." She sighed. "You should go to the hospital to take care of your illness." Qin Mo closed his eyes and waved. "Take care. I won't see you out." Qin Chen kicked him angrily. "How can you be like this? Burning bridges after crossing the river." Even though she was angry, she still cared about him. She reached out and laid him down. "You should be fine after a good night's sleep. I'm not going back today." Qin Mo felt much better. He closed his eyes. "Go to the guest room." Qin Chen smiled. "I'll sleep with He Huan." Her brother opened his eyes immediately and frowned. Qin Chen did it on purpose. "We're both girls. What's the matter?" Qin Mo sized up his sister from head to toe. She had neat short hair and handsome facial features. She wore a black shirt and black trousers. She casually wore a jacket on the outside. She was even more handsome than a man. Qin Mo didn't want to imagine such a sister lying together with his wife. He couldn't accept it, so he got up and said, "I'll go back to my room. You can sleep here. It's still warm." Qin Chen hugged the blanket in disgust. "I've worked so hard to come here, and I'm going to sleep here?" Qin Mo put on a fake smile and asked her in return, "What else would you do? Sleep with He Huan like this?" That scene was enough to catch me in the act. A guy who seduced second sister-in-law. Qin Chen was speechless. He lay down and said, "You're too stingy. It's not like I didn't sleep with He Huan when I was young." Qin Mo glared at her. "Don't even think about it now." As he spoke, he went out and returned to the master bedroom. He Huan was still sleeping, the kind that smelled good. Qin Mo chuckled soundlessly. His chuckle was somewhat helpless. She could still sleep soundly in this situation. She was really a little pig. He lay down and turned his head to look at her. He Huan must have felt the heat from him. She leaned over and even called out his name. Instantly, Qin Mo's heart calmed down. There was an indescribable feeling in his heart. He kissed her and said in a hoarse voice, "Good night." He Huan knew nothing about it. She was still in her sweet sleep. It was a dream that belonged to her when she was 18. She woke up at dawn and saw Qin Mo in a black shirt. She wrinkled her nose and said, "Qin Mo, why didn't you change into your pajamas?" His little nose sniffed like a puppy, and then he said in a low voice, "You smell like medicine." Qin Mo smiled faintly and wanted to say something. Qin Chen leaned against the door of the master bedroom handsomely. "Good morning, sweetheart." Chapter 4679. When He Huan heard the voice, she looked up from Qin Mo's arms and saw Qin Chen in a black shirt, leaning against the door with a cup of coffee in his hand. Those long legs were enough to make one's nose bleed, and that slightly messy short hair was simply, if not for the fact that she knew that Qin Chen was a woman, He Huan felt that she would have fallen for him immediately. However, He Huan had her own plans. She did not immediately fall in love with Qin Mo, but she was stunned by Qin Chen, which meant that Qin Chen was more handsome than Qin Mo. Just the thought of it made her look at Qin Mo sadly. Qin Mo had never been nice to Go Urseo's sister. He got up and walked over, kicking the door shut without any expression on his face. Then, he turned around and said to his silly wife, "Qin Chen is a woman. No matter how handsome she is still a woman. She can't give you happiness." He Huan sat on the bed. She was so small and she looked quite cute. She blinked her eyes and looked cute. It's good to look at him. After she said that, she saw Qin Mo's expression change. There was something unknown in his eyes. His eyes were clear and bright, as though he was doing something bad. He Huan was too young to understand, so she could only stare at him blankly. Her body also moved unnaturally. She wanted to escape, but Qin Mo would not allow her to. He pressed her head down. They were too close to each other, and He Huan was very uncomfortable. Her head moved in his hand. Qin Mo pressed her head down and asked in a low voice, "I'm not good-looking, huh?" He Huan was shocked and stammered, "You're good-looking." "Then why do you want to look at Qin? Is he better-looking than me?" His handsome face was getting closer, as though he wanted her to see him more clearly. He Huan's eyes widened. She bit her lip, not knowing what to do. Qin Mo narrowed his eyes. "Say something. You look just as good." He Xiaohuan had learned her lesson and squeezed out a fake smile. President Qin was not satisfied. He pinched her chin and continued to interrogate her. "Am I prettier or Qin? Or Ad Rongyu?" Actually, the three of them were easier to choose. At least, they wouldn't offend anyone. He Huan stared at him for a long time before slowly saying, "Qin is the best looking, followed by you and Rongyu." After she finished speaking, she carefully looked at Qin Mo. Qin Mo smiled. "You're not stupid." He Huan heaved a sigh of relief and said, "I just don't know if he's telling the truth." "Of course it's true." He Huan immediately said obsequiously, "It's definitely true. I don't lie." Qin Mo's expression brightened up a lot. In fact, it was not difficult to understand this kind of mentality. His imaginary enemy had always been Rongyu. At this moment, how could he care about his sister? He Huan immediately jumped out of bed and ran to the bathroom after she passed the first test. As she brushed her teeth, she recalled how Qin looked just now with a blushing face. Actually, Qin was the best looking. Even if he was a woman, it was good to look at him. He Huan continued to brush her teeth. As she brushed her teeth, she suddenly remembered something. She looked up at the mirror for a few seconds. Then, with the foam still in her mouth, she opened the door and said to Qin Mo, "Why is Qin here?" It was a little strange to be wearing a shirt and drinking coffee so early in the morning. Qin Mo was putting on his tie. When he heard her voice, he turned around. "He came over at night." He Huan roughly guessed it. She brushed her teeth fiercely and asked with her mouth full of foam, "Qin Mo, did you get sick last night?" Qin Mo did not deny it, nor did he say anything. He just looked at her quietly. He Huan's reaction was very strange. She brushed her teeth fiercely again and went to the bathroom to rinse her mouth. When she came out again, she fell into Qin Mo's arms. It was like two ribs were embedded in his arms. It was a little painful, but the pain was also warm. It turned into a little one that stayed in his arms peacefully. Qin Mo lowered his head and looked at her, his voice gentle. "What's wrong?" He Huan hugged him and buried her face in his chest. She asked him gloomily, "Why didn't you tell me that you were sick?" Qin Mo smiled gently. "You're not a doctor." That sounded right, but it was also wrong. He Huan was not a little fool. She bit her lower lip. "But I have to take care of you. Qin is enough." He lowered his head. "Moreover, you're just getting better. You need to rest, don't you?" He Huan always felt that there was something wrong with his words. Later, she found out that it was because in his heart, she had always been the one being taken care of. She didn't need to participate in anything he did. He treated her like a child. Later, she slowly became dissatisfied with his childlike attitude. But at this moment, He Huan still enjoyed the feeling of being doted on. She didn't think that there was anything wrong with Qin Mo's attitude. She nodded slowly and raised her head. "You should be fine now, right?" Qin Mo nodded and continued to tie his tie. He said, "I have to go to the office later. You stay at home. I'll get Qin to accompany you. She only goes to work in the afternoon." He Huan followed behind him. "Does Qin know how to cook?" Unexpectedly, when the door opened, Qin was leaning against the door. He raised his glass at He Huan and winked. "I know how to review." Qin Mo rolled his eyes at his sister's humor. Then he said to He Huan, Her cooking is comparable to that of a Michelin chef. He Huan's eyes sparkled. Could she change her husband? Qin Chen smiled again and put the coffee cup in He Huan's hand. The coffee I make is also top-notch. Do you want to try it? She had already made breakfast. Qin Emo walked over and said calmly, "She's not in good health." Besides, his eyes fell on his sister's face quietly. After a long time, he said in a hoarse voice, "Don't give her coffee." Qin Chen smiled and didn't say anything else. He Huan stared at them and felt that they were a little strange. Qin Chen patted her and sat down. "Have breakfast. I'll accompany you in the morning. Second brother should be back at noon." After saying that, she looked at Qin Emo thoughtfully. Qin Emo laughed. "I'm fine." He Huan looked at them. She wanted to ask but did not dare to. She was living in the world of two adults. To others, she was just a little kid. Suddenly, she felt nostalgic. If she became a director, would she be on equal footing with Qin Emo? Of course, it was just wise idea. Before she lost her memory, He Huan was still depressed. Qin Emo was really busy. He left after breakfast. Qin Chen accompanied him for breakfast. She looked up and saw He Huan stuffing bread into her mouth as she stared blankly in the direction of the window. Chapter 4680. She looked up and saw He Huan stuffing bread into her mouth as she stared blankly in the direction of the window. Qin Chen found it funny. He picked up his cup and took a sip of coffee. Then he asked casually, "He Huan, do you still like Rongyu?" He Huan exclaimed and came back to her senses. She stared at Qin Chen for a while and stammered, "Why do you ask that?" Qin Chen smiled. "You liked Rongyu until you were 24 years old. Then, you started to like Qin," she suddenly said. "Actually, think about it now. Do you like Rongyu or Qin Emo?" She added, "I think you've always liked Qin Emo. They look alike. When you were 16, you told Qin Mu secretly that you wanted to marry Qin Emo when you grew up." He Huan still remembered this embarrassing incident. Her face was burning hot. She almost did not dare to recall that she had said such embarrassing things in the past. Qin Chen smiled even more when he saw that she was embarrassed. She loved to tease young girls. Moreover, it was He Huan, whom she had always liked. Qin Chen had a preference for He Huan's appearance. It was fun to tease beautiful young girls, especially when the other party was his second sister-in-law. Qin Chen was very good at seducing his second sister-in-law. So, Qin Chen said a lot more about He Huan's adulthood scandals. He Huan wanted to find a hole to hide in. Qin Chen was finally satisfied. He smiled and let her go. The two of them, one big and one small, lay on the sofa and watched TV after breakfast. Both of them were not serious and just watched TV casually. Later, the guy who seduced the second sister-in-law even pulled He Huan into his arms. Disappointingly, He Xiaohuan did not refuse. There was a surveillance camera installed in the house. After the meeting, Qiu Qin came back and saw it. He was furious. When he returned to the apartment, his younger sister and his second sister-in-law were lying on the sofa together. The two of them smelled good together. Qin Emo was speechless. He felt like he was caught red-handed. However, even if she was angry, what could she do? Qin Chen was a woman. Qin Chen was chased away by his elder brother. He didn't even give him lunch and kicked him out mercilessly. After cleaning up the door, he looked at the little guy again. He had just woken up from a sound sleep, and he even stretched his body. Qin Emo didn't look too good. "You're awake?" He Huan grunted in acknowledgement, looking like she was in a daze. She rubbed her eyes and asked Qin Emo, "Where is Qin Chen?" Qin Emo didn't say anything and just looked at her quietly. For some reason, He Huan immediately understood. She stuttered and explained, "It's not what you think." Qin Emo gritted his teeth. "Of course there's nothing wrong with my sister's sexual orientation. But for you, I can't guarantee anything." He Huan exploded. "Of course there's nothing wrong with me. Prove it to me." Qin Mo's voice was emotionless, and so was his gaze. He Xiaohuan was stunned. When she came back to her senses, she asked him slowly, "How do I prove it?" Qin Mo's voice became softer. "Prove that you like men. Prove that there's nothing wrong with you." Now kiss me. He Huan never knew that there was such a trick. Kissing him was just to prove that there was nothing wrong with her? There was nothing wrong with her in the first place, okay? She didn't want to prove it. Why should she prove it to him? He was the one who was sick. Chapter 4681. He Huan stared at him and bit her lip. Why should I kiss you? Can kissing you prove it? Of course it can. Qin Mo said confidently and then moved forward. He Huan looked at the magnified handsome face and her heart suddenly started beating wildly. She couldn't say a word and just stared at his lips. There was only one word in her mind. Kiss him. She really kissed him. Just one kiss and then she left. Qin Mo didn't deepen the kiss and let her leave, but his eyes deepened a lot. He Huan kissed him and her heart beat faster. She looked at him in a daze. After a long time, she found her voice. Can I prove it now? Qin Mo gently touched his lips with his fingers and his heart skipped a beat. He smiled and said slowly, save it for the future. This is too far away. He Huan was in a trance. Qin Mo just smiled and put his arm around her shoulder. Have you eaten? He Huan wrinkled her little nose when he mentioned this. You chased Qin away. I'll cook for you. President Qin gently coaxed his little wife. He Huan bit her lower lip. I've been looking forward to the whole morning when you say that Qin does better than Michelin. She would do whatever Qin wanted. Now he chased him away. President Qin was very distressed. But looking at He Huan's pitiful and expectant expression, he sighed and finally called his sister. Qin, come back for a while. On the other side, Qin didn't actually leave. He was leaning against the door. She knew the 18-year-old He Huan too well. She was willful and had to get what she wanted. As for Qin Mo, he would probably grant her every request. Therefore, when the phone rang, she was not surprised at all. She hung up the phone and knocked on the door. He Huan was disappointed and looked at Qin Mo as if he was useless. However, when he heard the knock on the door, He Huan immediately trotted over. When the door was opened, she saw Qin's good-looking face. He Huan immediately hugged her arm and said, So you didn't leave. Qin was amused and pinched her face. If I leave, someone will probably drag me out of the operating room to cook a meal for some girl even if they chase me to the hospital. He Huan's face suddenly turned red. She bit her lip for a long time before she said, It's not like I have to eat it. Qin just smiled. It was a meaningful smile, and he looked at his brother again. Qin Mo, on the other hand, was very calm. I'm going to the study. Qin snorted and grabbed He Huan. Come and watch me cook. He Xiaohuan followed him in a daze. Later, in the kitchen, He Xiaohuan exclaimed from time to time. Ba. Qin Mo walked out of the study and looked impatient. The kitchen is not a circus. Qin, you can cook. You don't need to. Before he finished speaking, Qin Mo's eyes also widened. Qin smiled indifferently. I'm cooking imperial dishes from the Qin dynasty today. Qin Mo, you probably don't like these fancy things. Qin Mo looked over there for a long time before he coughed lightly. Sometimes I can make do with it. Qin smiled and didn't say anything else. The knife she used was specially made. The slices she cut were as thin as snowflakes, and the fruit carvings were as exquisite as works of art. He Huan was still making silly sounds, and Qin Mo was too lazy to correct her. Chapter 4682. By the time Qin was done cooking, it was already an hour later. There were 4 dishes and 2 sets of imperial pastries, which could not be found outside. Qin could not make it in time as she had surgery. When they left, He Huan was a little reluctant. Indeed, he was handsome, gentle, and could cook. He was the upgraded version of Qin Mo. He Huan felt it was a pity that Qin was a woman. She did not know that she was sighing. Qin Mo's voice sounded dangerously. If Qin was a man, what would you do? He Huan was shocked. She turned to look at Qin Mo and stammered, I don't want anything. Then she added, What can I do? Qin Mo covered her mouth with his and glanced at her. Don't even think about it. I know, it's a sin to think about it. He Huan bit her lips and snorted. Qin Emo was a little unhappy at first, but now he laughed softly and reached out to pinch her little face. You dare to talk back? How would I dare? He Huan was still gloomy. After a while, she looked at Qin Emo and thought of something. If she doesn't eat in the morning, will she starve to death? It's okay even if she doesn't eat for 2 days. Qin Emo teased her. He Huan glanced at him. Is she a camel? Qin Emo thought for a while and replied seriously, she might not have a camel, so Huan, you might have such a function. He Huan stared at him and only realized what he was talking about after a minute. She glared at him and blushed. After that, she was not very willing to talk to him and just ate gloomily. Qin Emo smiled. After a while, he teased her again. Where's the present you bought for me yesterday? He Huan made an sound and remembered. She pouted and said, I met my mother. She always sounded a little delicate when she spoke. Qin Mo's heart softened. He looked at her and asked her in a low voice, then tell me if I don't go, will you go home with your mother? Or will you insist on being with me? Ayaya, they were obviously an old couple, but talking about this now felt like it was like talking about their first love. Qin Emo had an indescribable feeling in his heart. He Huan let out an and lowered her head. After a while, she seemed to remember something. You're here. He didn't say much, just 4 words. You're here. Qin Emo reached out and gently caressed her face before saying hoarsely, silly. I'm not stupid. He Huan whispered. Qin Emo smiled. Why did you come back with me if you weren't stupid? He Huan did not say anything, but there was a touch of moisture in her eyes. Qin Emo knew that he had gone overboard with his joke. He pinched her face gently. I'll take you shopping later. He Huan was a little worried. Weren't you feeling unwell last night? He smiled and said gently, I'm much better now. He Huan made an oh sound and ate her food gloomily. Qin Emo knew her temper. She must be angry. So, he reached out and held her hand gently. He said softly, I won't do it again. She didn't say anything. She was still a little dejected. In fact, he understood that she couldn't let go of him. She had Rong Yu in her heart, but living with him was a kind of compromise. She probably couldn't accept herself in this way. Qin Emo felt a little heartache and held her hand. His voice was a little hoarse. We are husband and wife. Even if your memory is only 18 years old, your body is already 33 years old. We have been husband and wife for many years. You belong to me, not Rong Yu. Chapter 4683. Qin Mo's heart ached a little. He held her hand and said in a hoarse voice, We are husband and wife. Even if your memory is only 18 years old, your body is already 33 years old. We have been husband and wife for many years. You belong to me. You have never belonged to Rong Yu. For some reason, He Huan's heart suddenly relaxed when he said that. She felt indescribably relaxed. Perhaps she was afraid that something would happen between her and Rong Yu later. She replied obediently and then finished the rest of the dishes. Her little belly was round from eating. Therefore, Qin Emo often called his sister over to cook for him. Qin Chen complained a lot. She was the world's top chief surgeon for a surgery that cost tens of millions or even hundreds of millions. Her second brother asked her to cut vegetables, but Lan Yu only ate a few times. However, Qin Emo had a way to get her to come over. Cooking every now and then was something that happened later. At this moment, He Huan's stomach was full and she didn't want to move. In the end, she still took a good afternoon nap with Qin Emo. When she woke up, Qin Emo was still there. He was leaning against the headboard and playing with his phone. He seemed to be sending messages to the company's executives. He Huan woke up and felt lazy all over. She didn't want to move at all. Therefore, she still lay in his arms and said softly, Qin Emo, if you are busy, don't go out. It's just a routine. Secretary He's arrangements are the same. I was just waiting for you to wake up. He said softly and then kissed her. He got up and put on a sweater and coat for her. He did the same for himself, took his wallet and walked out. He Huan followed beside him and said softly, I didn't bring any money or card. Qin Emo pressed the elevator button and then looked at her. Come out with me. You don't need to bring your card. He Huan nodded. Thinking about it, it made sense. Her money was also his money. There was no difference. When the elevator reached the first floor, Qin Emo took her to a car. He Huan looked at him and then at the car, feeling that something was different. Only later did she realize that he seemed to be particularly dazzling today. Usually he was already very good-looking, but today he seemed to be more particular. Well, if he had to describe it, he seemed to be a little better looking than Qin. He Huan stared at him without blinking. Qin Emo smiled. What's wrong? He Huan said softly, You're a little different today. Qin Emo smiled and pinched her cheek. It's good that you like it. He Huan replied in a low voice, I didn't say I liked it. His gaze was a little deep. If you don't like it, why are you staring at it in a daze? You're even drooling. He Huan subconsciously reached out to touch her lips, only to realize that she had been tricked. She glared at Qin Emo. Qin Emo laughed. I said you're silly. He Huan snorted and glared at him. Qin Emo smiled and opened the car door for her. He Huan got into the car and turned to look at him. Qin Emo, where are we going? We're going to buy a gift first, then we'll have dinner together to celebrate twin breaking 2 billion. Qin Emo said with a smile as he fastened his seatbelt. He Huan was stunned. 2 billion? Really? I still can't believe it. It's 2019, Director He. Qin Emo looked at her sideways. It would be better if you were willing to direct commercial films. Actually, you have the talent. Chapter 4684. 2019, Director He. Qin Emo turned his head and looked at her. It would be better if you were willing to direct commercial films. Actually, you have the talent. He Huan was still in disbelief. After a long time, she said softly, but I don't remember it at all. I'll teach you, Qin Emo said straightforwardly. He Huan bit her lip. Really? But you're usually so busy with work. Qin Emo smiled. Time can be squeezed out. With that said, he ruffled her hair again and started the car. After driving for a while, he suddenly said, Fasten your seatbelt, idiot. He Huan nodded and quietly fastened her seatbelt. Then she looked very obedient. Qin Emo was driving. He was very focused on the car, but he smiled slightly. After that, He Huan didn't say much. She looked out the window and after a while, she turned to look at Qin Emo. Qin Emo, what kind of gift do you want? Qin Emo was wearing a white shirt and a thin sweater. His slender fingers were holding the steering wheel, and he looked very pleasing to the eye. He Huan was a little dazed. Just as she was in a daze, Qin Emo said, What I want, you might not be willing to give it to me. With that said, he turned his head and looked at her. He Huan's face immediately heated up, so much so that it was burning hot. She was already 18 years old mentally. How could she not understand what he was saying? But she pretended not to understand even if she did. He Huan's face turned red again and again. In the end, she could only turn her little face to the other side. Qin Emo smiled and didn't force her. He just reached out and held her hand while driving. His voice was low and husky, which was unique to men of his age. When the time comes, just let me know, he said with a smile. Then he let go of her hand. He Huan bit her lip. She held her hand gently and felt a wave of heat in her palm. It was the temperature of Qin Mo's palm. It was clearly only warm, but at that moment, He Huan felt an indescribable heat. She stole a glance at him and immediately averted her face. Qin Emo was driving. He noticed his little wife's behavior from the corner of his eye. He just felt that it was interesting and cute. After a while, his voice was elegant. Have you thought it through? What? He Huan's voice was slightly hoarse from her nervousness. She turned her head and stared at him. Completely, like a helpless little rabbit. Qin Emo smiled. Birthday present. What else do you think I'm talking about? There was a faint smile in his voice, as well as a hint of mockery. He Xiaohuan was a little annoyed, but she was more annoyed because she was at a loss for what to do. She seemed to be under his control. Therefore, she did not answer his question for a long time. She did not know how to answer him. She could only sulk, but she was also very cute when she sulked. As Chin Mo watched, he felt a little nostalgic. He said in a low voice, "Actually, it can be considered as compensation from the heavens." He finally understood that He Huan's memory loss wasn't a loss. It was compensation. It was to make up for what was missing in his heart. For them to really start afresh. He was the only one who remembered the unpleasant past, and her memories were all good things. The good things that belonged to him, Chin Mo, alone. Chin Mo smiled and slowly drove the car into the parking lot. They didn't get out of the car immediately. Instead, they stayed in the car for about half an hour. Well, this half an hour was spent kissing. Chapter 4685. After some time, Chin Mo finally let go of her. He Huan's face was burning. She kept staring at Chin Mo, unable to say a word. His eyes were sparkling, and it was indescribably moving. This was their first kiss since their reunion. Unlike a dragonfly touching the surface of the water, it was a real kiss. Both of them were breathing heavily, especially He Huan, who leaned back in her seat. Then, looking at Chin Mo helplessly was enough to melt his heart. Chin Mo turned sideways and stared at her. The look in his eyes made her tremble. He Huan didn't dare to move, as if he would do something she couldn't bear if she moved, like kissing her for another half an hour. After staring at each other silently for about half a minute, Chin Mo finally laughed. "Silly girl, it's not your first time kissing. Why are you acting so silly?" He Huan bit her lip. "I don't remember." He laughed. "Think about it carefully." After half a minute, she covered her face with her hands. They had kissed. He had kissed her during her first period, very gently. When she was asleep, he said that she had grown up, but He Huan still didn't feel that she had grown up. Chin Mo smiled and pulled her hand away. "Alright, get out of the car. You're still acting like a little girl." "I am a little girl." He Huan mumbled and looked at him sadly before getting out of the car. Chin Mo also got out of the car and naturally held her hand, like an old married couple holding the hand of a little girl. He Huan noticed something was different. She looked around and asked, "Why didn't you bring your bodyguard today?" "Because you don't like it." He laughed and said casually. He Huan didn't say anything else. She looked down at her hand that was holding his. She struggled a little, but she wasn't really trying to break free. Chin Mo just smiled. When they arrived at the mall, He Huan finally understood why he didn't bring his bodyguard. He thought that there was no one here except for the salespeople. There was only one person at the door, and that was Secretary He. He Huan tilted her head. "Chin Mo." Chin Mo smiled. "I've bought it over. The employees here are all transferred over from King Entertainment. There's no need to worry about any sudden incidents." He Huan was speechless. "If I go abroad, I could buy a shopping street too," he said quickly, smiling. He Huan didn't know how other girls felt when a man threw money at them. She just wanted to say that she felt very good at this moment. Well, she heard that he was her legal husband, so it was wrong to spend money like this. She could only think that she didn't want it to be like this. "Oh, next time I'll bring a bodyguard." She didn't want to go bankrupt and starve. Chin Mo smiled. Then He Xiaohuan realized that she had been tricked. He had done it on purpose. He deliberately let her follow the bodyguards. He was too cunning. He Huan glared at him. Chin Mo pretended that he didn't know and still had a smile on his face. He Huan snorted. He was too despicable. So she walked in front. But she had only taken 2 steps when Chin Mo grabbed her wrist. Chin Mo smiled. "Let's walk together." She glared at him fiercely. Chin Mo patted her little head. "Silly." "I'm not silly," she emphasized. Chin Mo didn't say anything more. He just held her hand and walked around with her. Secretary He followed behind them with a notebook in his hand. As long as He Huan looked at it for more than 10 seconds and touched it, he would write it down and get someone to bring it over. Chapter 4686. Secretary He followed behind them with a notebook in her hand. As long as He Huan looked at it for more than 10 seconds or touched it, she would write it down and get someone to bring it over. As long as the little baby was happy. Secretary he couldn't make the decision on her own since Qin Mo's birthday present had to be picked by He Huan herself. After all, she was paid by President Qin. He Huan went to a few men's shops. Qin Mo didn't like this one, neither did Qin Mo. He Huan felt that his taste was novel. Well, in other words, it was weird. When they arrived at a jewelry shop, He Huan said meekly, "I'm not buying it." Qin Mo looked at her and stretched out his finger. "I think I'm missing something here." He Huan snorted again. "You can only lie to young girls if you don't wear it." Qin Mo looked at her and smiled. "Do you think I would lie to someone like that?" He Huan was stunned for a moment before she looked a little angry. She didn't know how to hide her emotions at 18 years old. Qin Mo pulled her back, his voice gentle. "What's wrong? Are you angry again?" "I'm not." She was angry. Qin Mo reached out and pinched her little face. He thought it was funny. "Really?" He Huan didn't say anything at first. Then she said sullenly, "Go find it if you want." Qin Mo was amused. "How did you know I was looking?" As he spoke, he smiled and said, "Help me pick a ring." He Huan was in a bad mood. She didn't know why she cared so much. He had just said something normal and it was the truth. Therefore, when Qin Mo was choosing, she was always absent-minded. Qin Mo picked a ring. It was just a simple ring, but it looked different on his finger. "How about this?" Qin Mo's voice was warm and smiling. He Huan was actually blinked, but she still had to be reserved. Hence, she just hummed perfunctorily. She didn't move her eyes away from his hand. "Fingers, so beautiful." Qin Mo smiled again and said to the counter, "Do you have the same style of women's ring?" The receptionist immediately smiled like a flower. "Mr. Qin, please wait a moment. Let me check Mrs. Qin's finger size first." It was He Huan's first time being addressed as Mrs. Qin, so she was a little flustered. She bit her lip for a long time before saying, "I'm not." Qin Mo suddenly looked at her, making her unable to say those words. Then she obediently showed her palm to the receptionist. The receptionist quickly took out a delicate ring and put it on for her, saying, "This is the only one in the world, designed by a famous designer. It suits Mrs. Qin very well." He Huan wanted to deny it again, but in the end, he could only look at Qin Mo weakly. "Very beautiful." Qin Mo's gaze fell on her fingers. This was something he should have done when she was 18 years old. He should have settled on her when she was 18 years old, but he had fulfilled his wish many years later. Qin Mo's eyes were a little hot. He looked at her for a while and pulled her out. He Huan whispered behind them, "You haven't paid yet. You're leaving?" "I ordered it," he said softly. Then he stopped and smiled. "Otherwise, I wouldn't have found such a suitable size." He Huan stood and looked up at him. Suddenly, she reached out and took the ring off her finger. The inner ring was engraved with a circle of words. Qin Mo 1 love 1 He Huan 1 love 1. Chapter 4687. Her lips trembled slightly, and then she called out softly, "Qin Mo will me." Qin Mo replied, took the ring from her hand, and put it on for her. "Don't cry." Qin Mo grunted, took the ring from her hand, and put it on for her. "Don't cry." He Huan tried her best not to cry, but she still sniffed disappointedly. Qin Mo placed his palm on her hair and rubbed it gently. "You've grown up." As he said that, he still couldn't hide the feeling in his heart, and he leaned forward to kiss her. All the salesgirls in the mall were watching this scene. Oh my God, President Qin looked so soft. Oh my God, there were pink bubbles floating everywhere, and it was even more romantic than those idol dramas. It was mainly because of his looks. He was really tall, rich, and handsome. After the kiss, Qin Mo straightened up and said in a low voice, "Do you feel like you're in love now?" He Huan bit her lip and suddenly hugged his arm, not letting him straighten up. Qin Mo said in a low voice, "What's wrong?" He Huan hung on his arm like a little bear. Qin Mo looked at her for a while and smiled gently. "Do you want me to kiss you again?" She didn't speak, but just looked up at him quietly. Qin Mo smiled and leaned forward to kiss her again. After the kiss, he said in a low voice, "Are you satisfied?" "A little," she stammered, and her eyes fell on his lips without moving. Qin Mo straightened up and held her hand. "Let's go eat." He Huan asked as they walked. "Is this enough as a birthday present?" he said, and then lowered his head to look at her. "Plus you, it should be enough." He Huan's face turned red again. She didn't remember what she ate that day. When she really came back to her senses, Qin Mo had already driven back to the apartment. "Why aren't you getting out of the car?" He tilted his head and looked at her. He Huan was still floating, and her voice sounded absent-minded. "We're home." The corners of his lips curled up slightly. "What else can I do?" He Huan nodded, unbuckled her seatbelt, and was about to get out of the car. But her wrist was immediately caught by a firm hand and pressed gently against the back of the chair. "Qin Mo?" He Huan turned to look at him weakly. He was very calm and still had a faint smile on his face. If one didn't truly feel it, one wouldn't be able to tell that he was being forcefully treated. Qin Mo gently pinched her chin with his other hand. "Don't you have anything to say to me?" "What are you talking about?" He Huan felt even more helpless and kept looking at him. Qin Mo smiled and let go of her. The pressure on He Huan's wrist was released. She was stunned again and looked at him. Qin Mo opened the car door and turned around. "I thought you would always say that you were very happy." He Huan exclaimed again and was speechless for a long time. He got out of the car and went to her side. He opened the car door and carried her out. He Huan refused, so he patted her and said, "Be good." He Huan bit her lip and mumbled, "I don't want to be good." Qin Mo laughed happily. He carried her home and kissed her a few more times. He was very satisfied with the way they were getting along, and He Huan temporarily forgot about Rongyu. After all, the 40-year-old Qin Mo was not like the 20-year-old. A mature man was very good at coaxing women, and He Xiaohuan couldn't resist him at all. When they got home, Qin Mo went to the study to deal with some business for a while. He told He Huan to take a shower and go to bed. But when he returned to the bedroom, he saw that the little thing was not only not taking a shower but was still playing games. Chapter 4688. He Huan was still playing the game, and she was very engrossed in it. Qin Mo took off his sweater and threw it on the back of the sofa before sitting beside her. He pulled her ear. "Oh no, you're still playing games so late." He looked at his watch. It was already past 11 o'clock. He felt that He Huan's crime was unforgivable. He Huan cried out in pain as he pulled her ear, but she couldn't bear to put her phone down. Her fingers were still moving. Qin Mo snorted. He didn't carry her anymore and put her back on the sofa. The little guy didn't have the eyesight and was still playing. Qin Mo whispered into her ear, "Is it fun?" "It's fun. I passed a few levels today." He Huan didn't notice the danger and was still playing happily. Qin Mo smiled and walked to the bathroom. "I'm going to take a shower." He Huan didn't suspect anything else. She nodded and let him be. Qin Mo looked at her again at the bathroom door and then closed the bathroom door. In less than 10 minutes, Qin Mo came out of the bathroom. He was wearing a bathrobe and holding a towel in his hand. He wiped the water off his hair and looked at the phone in He Huan's hand. Just as she was about to pass the level, he suddenly pulled the phone away. "Time to sleep." "Ugh." He Huan's small body bounced up. Qin Mo took the phone and helped her log out. He looked at her and said, "I said I was going to sleep." With that said, he pulled her to lie down and covered her with the blanket. He Huan opened her eyes and looked at the darkness that followed. She was speechless. She punched the blanket. "Qin Mo, you're being unreasonable." He said, "Is that so? I gave you a chance, but you didn't listen and kept playing." "Oh yes, is the game fun?" He Huan's voice was soft again. "You're being unreasonable." Qin Mo ignored her and closed his eyes to sleep. He Huan lay straight and stared at the darkness. "I want to take a shower. I stink." "Qin Mo." She called him for a long time before he reluctantly responded, "Well, you lost the right to bathe because of playing games. Do you regret it now?" He Huan was shocked and glared at him. However, this stare was not obvious in the darkness. He smiled again. "He Huan, you're really a dirty kid." She couldn't take it anymore and cried out, You're the one who didn't allow me to take a bath. Did I? You were the one who gave up. He chuckled. Huan gnashed his teeth. Qin Mo, you're too despicable. Qin Mo patted her shoulder. That's what you have to do with a disobedient child. No, a young girl who's addicted to the internet. He took a sniff and then said hatefully, it really stinks. Huan wanted to cry. Although she wasn't that stinky, she had been pampered since she was young. It was a good habit to take a shower before sleeping. She couldn't sleep without it. After a long time, she finally believed that Qin Mo really wouldn't let her go. She curled her lips and bit her lip. After a long time, she said in a low voice, Qin Mo, am I not easy to take care of? Yeah, you're more troublesome than Huan. He closed his eyes and reached out to rub her fluffy hair. Huan should at least be more obedient. Huan leaned on his shoulder and bit her lip. Then you can send me to Enchanting. You can take care of Huan. Qin Mo was shocked. She could do this? Could she be more shameless? Chapter 4689. Updated quickly, Qin Mo was shocked. She could do this? Could she be any more shameless? Qin Mo looked at the middle-aged girl and did not react for a long time. He did not know that Huan could be so shameless. She was really shameless. Qin Mo sat up and turned on the light. Then he looked at Huan, amused and annoyed. Enchanting is so young, yet he has to take care of you? Huan said confidently, didn't you say that he took care of Huan? You also said that I am not as good as Huan, so taking care of me is not a problem for him. Qin Mo did not know whether to laugh or cry. Huan, can you be any more shameless? There's nothing wrong with this logic. Her little face looked very lively when she was reasoning with him. Qin Mo stared at her face for a long time and suddenly sighed softly. Yes, there is nothing wrong with it. However, if there was anything that was logical, they would not be together now. He sighed softly. Huan was a little proud of herself. Her face was full of vitality. Qin Mo reached out and touched her face. His voice was a little hoarse. All right, go take a shower. Don't do it again. Huan immediately jumped off the bed and ran to the bathroom. Qin Mo did not go to sleep immediately. He sat on the bed and swiped his phone to help her pass a few levels. He heard Huan humming in the bathroom. She is still taking a bath. He thought to himself. However, the atmosphere was still pleasant. After Qin Mo cleared the 5th stage, Huan also ran out. She was wearing pajamas with a cartoon cow on it. Qin Mo put his phone on the bed, caught her, and put her under the quilt. She smelled good. Well, it was good for sleep. However, the little girl, who had just taken a bath, was not sleepy. She probably slept too much during the day. She kept pestering him to talk, mainly because she wanted to see Huan. Qin Mo was silent for a while in the darkness. Then, he tilted his head and looked at the little head on his shoulder. His voice was slightly hoarse. Do you really want to see him? Huan grunted and said softly, can you let me see her? Maybe I can be a good mother. Qin Mo was still looking down at her. After a long time, he suddenly said, let's meet tomorrow, but not for the time being. Enchanting can take good care of her. Huan felt a little hurt. He patted her head and said in a low voice, listen to me. Enchanting knows her better than you do. Moreover, I want to live alone with you for a while. Then when can I live with Huan? She's my child, isn't she? Huan asked hoarsely. Qin Mo smiled. Of course. Otherwise, how could I have given birth to him? Huan glared at him. I'm not joking. I'm not joking either. Like you said, she's your child. No one can take her away. Qin Mo kissed her cheek. We'll live together in autumn. Huan looked at him. So long? Then winter will be fine. Qin Mo chuckled. So, the little girl who had been disgusted for a long time immediately said, autumn is autumn. We can't delay it any longer. Besides, she stretched out her white fingers and counted one by one. Besides, I want to see her once or twice a week, including but not limited to eating, bathing, and sleeping together. Qin Mo was annoyed and amused. Are you treating it as a family? Isn't life just eating, bathing, and sleeping? Yi-Hwan asked him back, which made him stumped. Qin Emo thought about it and realized that it seemed to be like that. Chapter 4690. Qin Emo thought it was right and couldn't refute it. Yi-Hwan's eyes were sparkling. After a long time, Qin Emo suddenly reached out to cover her eyes and let out a long sigh. Time to sleep. Yi-Hwan snorted. You can't beat me. He smiled. Yes, I can't beat you. Mrs. Qin, it's time to go to bed. Yi-Hwan leaned against him with satisfaction. After a while, she suddenly said softly, Qin Emo, yes? Qin Emo touched her little head. What's wrong? Yi-Hwan's face was even tighter. We must have had a good life before. He nodded again. Yes, it was. So she said with great certainty, you must love me very much. Qin Emo really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He pressed her into his arms. Don't talk. I have a meeting tomorrow. Yi-Hwan was obedient for a while, and her voice came out again. You just love me very much. Qin Emo was helpless and sighed again. Yes, I love you very much. He lowered his head and kissed her. Okay, time to sleep. Yi-Hwan put her arms around his neck and didn't say anything. She was always in poor health and fell asleep after a while. When she woke up in the morning, Qin Emo had already gone to make breakfast. She sat up and leaned against the headboard, biting her little finger and thinking, what is he waiting for? Of course, Yi-Hwan wouldn't take the initiative. She just bit her finger and sighed in her heart. She couldn't admit what she was looking forward to. Qin Emo finished making breakfast and came to wake her up. He saw the little girl sitting there nervously. Qin Emo smiled. What are you thinking about? Get up. Come to the company with me today, and I'll take you back to the villa tonight. Don't you want to see Yi-Hwan? Oh, Yi-Hwan replied, feeling motivated for the whole day. She sat up and messed up her hair. Where shall we sleep tonight? He probably knew her desire and smiled warmly. Let's sleep in the villa. Come back tomorrow. Yi-Hwan was a little excited. She nodded and ran to the bathroom. Qin Emo smiled, feeling a little complicated. To him, Yi-Hwan's behavior was good, and he was happy about it. However, to Yi-Hwan, she might lack a little maternal love. After all, Yi-Hwan was a middle-aged girl now. How could she give Yi-Hwan any maternal love? It was better to count on Enchanting than Yi-Hwan. As Qin Emo was thinking, Yi-Hwan had already come out. After breakfast, they went to King Entertainment. However, Yi-Hwan had not expected to meet Rong-Yu at King Entertainment. Didn't they say that his health wasn't very good and that he would have to stay in the hospital for a few days? Why did he come here? Yi-Hwan was having some snacks at Secretary He's place when Rong-Yu pushed the door open and entered. Secretary He cursed in her heart. She had forgotten that Rong-Yu was here today, and Yi-Hwan was here as well. If President Qin knew about this, he would be extremely jealous. But no matter what, she still welcomed him warmly. Mr. Rong, President Qin is in a meeting. It will end in about half an hour. Why don't you wait in the guest room for a while? Rong-Yu's gaze fell on Yi-Hwan's face. Yi-Hwan was also looking at him as she ate the snacks. In her memory she liked Rong-Yu, but now he had a wife. Yi-Hwan couldn't lie to herself and say that she didn't care or like him anymore, but she had to restrain herself. He had a wife. She just stared straight at him. Secretary He groaned in his heart. What would he do if President Qin saw this? Chapter 4691. The more he thought about it, the more likely it would happen. Secretary He's heart was still trembling. Qin Emo was already standing at the door of the secretary's office. He knocked on the door with the file in his hand and said to Rong-Yu, "Let's talk in my office." Secretary He heaved a sigh of relief. President Qin was still magnanimous. Just as he thought about it, Qin Emo looked at the little girl and coughed lightly. "Stay here and eat." Secretary He, the second and third secretaries were speechless. President Qin was so stingy. But Qin Emo wasn't ashamed of it. Instead, he was proud of it. He had to keep a close eye on his wife, especially a lost lamb like Yi-Hwan. He talked to Rong-Yu for a while. The script was secondary, and the main topic was AI Jia. It was time to close the net. The information and evidence that Chin Mo had brought was enough to send AI Jia to prison for 10 or 20 years. While they were chatting, Rong Yu lit a cigarette but was stopped by Chin Mo. Don't smoke. Chin Chen said that with your broken body, it's best for you to quit smoking and women. Women can't be helped, but you can quit smoking, right? So Rong Yu just smiled and stopped smoking. He put the cigarette between his fingers and lit it. After a while, he suddenly looked up. Actually, He Huan has always liked you, not me. Chin Mo was a little surprised. Kan Xiao told me. Rong Yu smiled calmly. Maybe a bystander sees things more clearly. Kan Xiao has always been an outsider, so he sees things more clearly than we do. Chin Mo nodded slightly. I got it. Rong Yu thought that Chin Mo should have known, but he knew and expressed his feelings to the 33-year-old He Huan. Facing He Huan, who had returned to the past, he was also helpless. Rong Yu left quickly. He Huan watched him pass by from the secretary's office, her eyes wide open. She thought that Rong Yu would just walk away, but when he was about to reach the elevator, he suddenly turned to look at her and gave her a warm smile. He Huan felt a little relieved. She thought that perhaps after so many years, she had come back to the present for this relief. She waved at Rong Yu. The warmth in Rong Yu's eyes deepened, and he finally left. He Huan lowered her hand and said to Secretary He, actually, AI Meng Meng isn't too bad. Rong Yu will be very happy, right? Secretary He also smiled faintly. Yes, they are quite happy. He Huan made a face at him. I'm relieved. After that, he ran to find Chin Mo looking at He Huan's back. Secretary He thought to himself, at his age, President Chin would probably be rejuvenated to be with such a young girl. He Huan went to Chin Mo's office. Chin Mo was reading documents calmly. She went over and pressed on his shoulder from behind. Her voice was a little delicate. Don't you have anything to say to me? Chin Mo's gaze was still on the file in his hands. He smiled faintly and said, what else is there to say? We have been husband and wife for a long time. Rong Yu also has a wife. If I must say something, I still want to tell you that you are mine. He Huan stuck out her tongue and sat on the armrest of his chair. In just a short while, she was pulled into Chin Mo's arms. He Huan protested softly. Chin Mo, aren't we an old couple? An old couple shouldn't be so intimate. We have always been like this. He caressed her hair and chuckled. He Huan's face instantly turned red again. She couldn't say a word. Chapter 4692. Updated quickly. When Rong Yu returned to the hospital, AI Meng Meng was sitting on the sofa in the ward with a book in her hand. It was Rong Yu's work. She sat there and read it quietly. Rong Yu pushed the door open and entered. AI Meng Meng immediately put down the book and stood up. You're back. He nodded and sat down with her. It's just a script. Why are you so worried? AI Meng Meng looked down. Rong Yu, it's not that I'm worried. You're not in good health. Dr. Chin also said that you'd better not write scripts. He looked at her and smiled. I'm just interested. AI Meng Meng looked at him and wanted to say something. She wanted to tell him about the 40 million yuan, but she couldn't bring herself to say it. She was too weak and naive. With her around, Rong Yu might have a hard time. 40 million yuan was enough for Rong Yu to spend for the rest of his life. He could find any kind of caregiver and nanny. She thought to herself that she would only harm him. It would be hard and she would lose the respect of men. AI Meng Meng closed her eyes and didn't want to think about what had just happened. AI Jia came to her again. This time, AI Jia didn't want money. When she was waiting for Rong Yu in the ward, she received a call from AI Jia. Later, they met in the corridor of the hospital. AI Jia took off her mask and sneered. Rong Yu wants to kill me. He wants me to go to jail. AI Meng Meng was stunned. She didn't know what to say. She didn't have any affection for AI Jia and she also thought that AI Jia deserved to go to jail. She was too evil. However, she knew in her heart that AI Jia's visit was definitely not a good thing. So she looked down and said, I can't help you. Really? AI Jia sneered. You can't help me, or you don't want to help me. Or maybe you want me to go to jail until I die of old age. You must think that I deserve it, right? At this time, AI Meng Meng really wanted to say yes. But she couldn't. She knew that AI Jia was crazy and she could do anything. As expected, when she was silent, AI Jia spoke again. Rong Yu is really not that smart. He thinks that he can do anything to me just because he has evidence? Too naive. AI Jia took out a brown paper bag and placed it in AI Meng Meng's hand. Take a look at this. You will know if you can defeat me. AI Meng Meng's fingers gripped the craft paper, her fingertips turning white. She really didn't want to read it, but she knew in her heart that she had to. His hands trembled as he opened it. His expression changed as soon as he saw what it was. AI Jia actually, AI Meng Meng looked up, her eyes filled with indescribable exhaustion. Yes, exhaustion. She lost. Rong Yu also lost. Qin Mo and He Huan had both lost. AI Jia was a crazy woman. What she had was enough to send everyone to hell. We still underestimated you. AI Meng Meng's voice was very soft. What do you want me to do? Surrender. AI Jia chuckled. Are you still the sister I know? Aren't you very unyielding? AI Meng Meng closed her eyes. I surrender, but the final outcome will not be what you think. It won't be what you think either. AI Jia sneered. I forgot to tell you that the guy who treated you like that, Lu Gui or Li Gui, is out. I heard that he has some wonderful photos in his hands. Meng Meng, think about Lu Gui. He's talented and good-looking. How can he not find a woman? Don't you think you're a little too narcissistic by tying him up like this? Chapter 4693. It's not what you think. AI Jia sneered. AI Jia sneered. I forgot to tell you that the guy who treated you like that, Lu Gui or Li Gui, is out. I heard that he has some wonderful photos in his hands. Meng Meng, think about Lu Gui. He's talented and good-looking. How can he not find a woman? Don't you think you're a little too narcissistic by tying him up like this? AI Meng Meng slowly opened her eyes and stared at AI Jia for a while. Then she said calmly, I know. Can I leave him? Please let him go in the future. AI Jia smiled sharply. I can't guarantee that I'll let him go, but I can guarantee that without you, Rong Yu will be much more relaxed. AI Meng Meng didn't say anything. She just lowered her eyes and smiled after a while. AI Jia, you loved someone. Ma, did you love a man named Qin Lu? I don't think you love him. You just think that you love him. In fact, you don't love anyone. You only love yourself. She paused for a moment, then said slowly and firmly, You're a selfish lunatic. She scolded her so harshly, but AI Jia didn't care. The only thing she cared about was whether AI Meng Meng was obedient. However, AI Meng Meng didn't want to talk to her anymore. She just said, I'll leave tomorrow. AI Jia, I can leave, but I won't let you go if you hurt Rong Yu. She paused for a moment. You should know that we share the same blood. There's nothing I can't lose, so I'm willing to do anything. Then she stared at AI Jia for a few seconds. That gaze made AI Jia uncomfortable, but at the same time, it felt very familiar. Later, she remembered that she often looked at AI Jia with a sinister and ruthless gaze. When she was almost done with by AI Meng Meng in the end, she thought that they really had the same blood. When she went crazy, she wouldn't even recognize her own family. But now, AI Meng Meng had Rong Yu. She didn't dare to act rashly, and AI Jia wouldn't easily touch Rong Yu. What she wanted was the Qin family's share. Fame, wealth, and glory that belonged to her. She had to get it back bit by bit. At this moment, Rong Yu and AI Meng Meng were talking, and she was in a daze for a while. What's wrong? Rong Yu asked softly. AI Meng Meng shook her head. I'm fine. Since things were going well, Rong Yu was in a good mood and chatted with her. I met He Huan just now. AI Meng Meng's heart skipped a beat when she heard He Huan's name. She bit her lower lip and asked in a low voice, and then? Rong Yu looked at her and smiled. I thought you would react more. I won't think too much about it. She said softly, Rong Yu, that's all in the past. He Huan has always been nice to us. She was not a cold-hearted person. She was originally a person who had been abandoned. She was content to receive so much. She couldn't forgive herself for what she did to Yi Huan in the past, but Yi Huan didn't hold it against her. Instead, she helped her so much. Although it was for Rongyu's sake, it was enough for AI Meng Meng to appreciate it. She was not an ingrate. Rongyu was relieved when she said that. However, he didn't know that AI Meng Meng had other thoughts. He was too tired and couldn't focus. If he didn't take an afternoon nap, he would have noticed that something was wrong with her. Chapter 4694. At 2 in the afternoon, He-Huan received an unfamiliar call. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, He-Huan received a call from an unfamiliar number. He-Huan froze for a moment, then said softly, "What's up?" AI Meng Meng said, "Is it convenient for you to meet me?" AI Meng Meng said, "Is it convenient for you to meet me?" She said hurriedly, "I'm in the cafe downstairs at King Entertainment." He-Huan found it strange and bit her lip. "Rongyu just came in the morning, why didn't you come with him?" AI Meng Meng said something in a low voice that He-Huan couldn't hear clearly, but she still went downstairs. Of course, there were 2 bodyguards and a secretary by her side. She pushed open the cafe door and saw AI Meng Meng sitting by the window, holding a cup of hot coffee in her hand, lost in thought. He-Huan went over and sat opposite her. The bodyguards and secretaries sat at the next table, paying close attention to the surroundings. AI Meng Meng looked up at He-Huan and said, "Director He." He-Huan smiled. "Call me He-Huan. I'm not Director He anymore, I don't even know what a storyboard is." AI Meng Meng said softly, "But to me, you will always be Director He." He-Huan couldn't stand it. Besides, she didn't know what happened later, so it was really difficult for her. But she still gave face to AI Meng Meng. She was still a love rival. He-Huan pretended to be relaxed. AI Meng Meng kept holding the cup, looking like she wanted to say something. He-Huan looked at her, her eyes fixed on her. After a long time, she asked softly, "Did you quarrel with Rongyu?" AI Meng Meng shook her head, then nodded vigorously. He-Huan was a little embarrassed. Just then, the secretary came over with a cup of hot fruit tea. He-Huan took a sip and drank half a cup before saying, "Rongyu is very good, AI Meng Meng, treat him well." AI Meng Meng shook her head again. "No." He-Huan looked at her in bewilderment. AI Meng Meng gripped the cup tightly. "I might leave here, I want to go back to my hometown. In the future." As she spoke, she looked straight into He-Huan's eyes. "Can you take care of Rongyu for me?" He-Huan was stunned. Her mouth was wide open, and she only recovered after a while. "I still need someone to take care of me. I'm begging you, He-Huan. For the sake of you and him, and for the sake of how good Rongyu is sick and can't travel far. He can only stay in the city where Qinshan is, so please take care of him." AI Meng Meng bit her lips. This time, He-Huan knew that she was telling the truth. She sighed softly, "Why did you leave him?" AI Meng Meng held the coffee in her hand. "My existence will only harm him. He-Huan, I have to go." As she spoke, she stood up as if she was about to leave. He-Huan was still sitting there. She looked up and said, "AI Meng Meng, you can't leave if I don't want you to." "Yes, I can't leave, but I know that you will let me go for the sake of Rongyu." AI Meng Meng smiled bitterly. "I can't stay any longer, the ending will not be good." As she spoke, she took a simple piece of luggage and walked towards the door. The secretary asked softly, "Do you want to tell President Qin?" He-Huan sat there quietly. After a long time, she smiled faintly. "No need." She did not know why she did not want to stop AI Meng Meng. She always felt that stopping her would be the cruelest. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.